I'm gonna turn that light off behind me. Do not like this, Sam. I am.
We are live. We can go ahead and start, Brad, whenever you'd like.
Okay, perfect. So we are now past 6 o'clock on Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. And this open meeting of the Northborough Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the Zoning Board of Appeals are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Zoning Board of Appeals of Northborough to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. So before we jump into the agenda for tonight's meeting, because I know we've been on delay for 3-4 months, I just want to congratulate, well, not congratulate, but I want to thank the town staff for all their hard work during this pandemic, particularly Kathy Jubert, Bob Federico, and Fred Litchfield, and as well as Andy Dowd, who's not here, but he did a great job yesterday at Milliken Middle School. I also want to thank everybody, all the attendees who came out to vote. From what I heard, they were record numbers. And thank you for those who put their hats in the ring to run for public office, and congratulate those who won yesterday. So before we start off, I just want to say thank you to everybody. All right, so in accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 9, the Northborough Zoning Board of Appeals will hold public hearings today, Wednesday, July 1st, 2020, 6 p.m. to consider the following hearings. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order, like I was saying earlier, suspending provisions of the imposing strict limitations on the number of people that they may gather in one place, this meeting of the Northborough Zoning Board of Appeals will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. To participate in the public comment, we see we have a good amount of attendees. There was a link attached to this agenda. So we're all going through an interesting and very interesting piece of history right here. I just ask all of you to be cordial, to be as compliant as possible, and you will all have an opportunity to speak. These are public hearings, and to keep things moving along, all attendees, I ask that you have 60 seconds to talk about whether you're in favor or you're opposed to a certain petition, and we're going to move things along as quickly and expeditiously as possible. First off, We are going to consider the petition of Scott Dunnett, I apologize if I butchered that name, for a variance special permit to allow a replacement above ground pool to be located less than the required 15 feet from a side yard setback. The pool was installed, but the property was split via an approved, not required plan afterwards. The subject property is located at 121 Hudson Street, map 46, parcel 1, in the residential C district and the groundwater protection overlay district area 2. So, Mr. Dunnett, I apologize if I'm butchering your name. Are you online? Are you available?
Scott, I do see him as one of the attendees. So I think,
Yeah, I'm bringing him in
David,
as a
can you just bring
panelist, yeah.
in? Yeah.
Okay, we just unmuted. Is that,
Hello?
Scott,
Hi,
is that
we
you?
can-
Yes, that's me right here.
And how do you pronounce your last name for the
Dunnett.
record? Dunnett.
Dunnett.
Okay.
That's okay.
And just please state your name and your address for the record, and you are able to proceed.
My name's Scott Dunnett. I'm a resident here at 121 Hudson Street in Northborough. And I had the pool installed and I had no idea that there was a law of the abutting my girlfriend's brother's house next door to us. And we put a pool in maybe 10 years ago, 2009, and his house wasn't there then. So not even a thought about it. I didn't know anything about it at all. And I didn't know anything about it all till all this happened after the new pool was installed last year. So we're going for it.
and if I can add, I'm Peter Stone. Actually put up the original pool. I was the original owner of 121 Hudson Street. And we had subdivided the property in probably around 2004, 2005. And I had a pool when I owned the entire parcel prior to it being subdivided. And that's where, when we went through the subdivision process, the pool never seemed to come up. It was an above ground pool. It was always considered being above ground, not necessarily a permanent structure. So that's where I was when I originally installed it. I think it was 95, 96. And the pool is basically in the same place. And I have no problem, of course, I'm the the main abutter here at 1 Vanessa Drive, and I'm fine with the pool's location, and we're all in the family. And we intend to keep it that way for quite some time. So.
Okay, and so one of the things I'm looking at on the agenda is says 15 feet, but it says 4 feet. So is this pool 4 feet from your property? I know it's split.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay,
4 feet from the.
I just want to understand that. Okay.
And the reason I originally had put it there was because we had the old time cesspool to the right of where the pool is now, and to the left was actually an old cow barn. That's an old foundation where a cow barn used to be when we were kids growing up. So that's why that's the most level and capable place to put in the pool. That's why I originally put it there. And like I said, I think it was 95, 96.
Gotcha. Okay. Any of my fellow board members, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Mr. Dunnett or Mr. Stone? Anyone?
So just one question. So you said the property was subdivided from one lot to two lots in 2004, 2005, but the pool was originally installed before that?
Yes. Yeah, the pool, I put the pool in when I probably in 95, 96, when I lived on the entire site. Yeah, and then I sold the main house at 121 to my sister Noreen and Scott, and then I retained the other lot at Vanessa Drive, and then I actually built my house, I think in 2009 is when I put up the structure at 1 Vanessa Drive.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. But Bob Federico, building inspector, just for my own edification, like can you give a little background to the rest of the board on, I mean, I completely understand what's going on, but why was the lot subdivided and, just as far as bylaws go?
The lot was subdivided through an A&R, which didn't really require a whole lot of review. It's just a once over look at. I want to back up just a little bit if I could.
Sure.
This gentleman's looking for a variance and not a variance in a special permit. Okay, because it's strictly for the setbacks to a property line, which typically is
Right.
15 feet in this case.
Yep.
When the pool was installed, the pool was kind of put in the middle of the lot before this new house was constructed. So when the pool was originally installed, it was legal. What made it become illegal is that they A&R'd the lot and they had the lot line 4 feet to the pool. That was done with one of my predecessors back in 2009, I believe. So, one of the things we can do is either move the pool, which seems to be kind of an issue given the terrain and the location of the other underground structures that the applicant was talking about. So I said the only other thing you can really do is apply for a variance and get 11 feet of relief.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does for me. Yep. And obviously the main abutter is on the call and he has no objections. Any other questions from the board?
I'm good.
Any other comments from staff?
No, I don't have any, and I think Fred's just helping out with a computer issue with Debbie, but I don't think that he has any issues with this. There was nothing to do with groundwater or, site plan. It was just, it's a straight, mistake that was made or, something that was overlooked, years ago. And this is really the only way to correct it.
Sure. No, and I definitely applaud them coming forward and just trying to clear everything up and make sure the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. So I definitely appreciate that. So this is a public hearing. Do any of the attendees have any questions or comments on 121 Hudson Street?
That's the rest of the abutters.
Okay. And nothing from staff, no final questions from the board. Would anyone like to make a motion? To close the hearing?
Make a motion to close the hearing.
Anyone want a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, this hearing is closed. Thank you very much, Mr. Stone. A decision will be made later this evening. You're more than welcome to hang on, or you can call well, I don't know if you can call the office tomorrow because there's no one in the town office.
No, well, I'll be here.
Oh, you will? Okay.
Yeah, I'll be in the office tomorrow.
Are you in the office right now?
Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Friday.
All right.
It starts Friday.
Yeah. Okay, so 121 Hudson Street is closed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
So Brad, just before you start, if I had David let Mark in, Mark Donahue, who's on for the next hearing, if you're going to go, in line on the agenda for Goddard Road, and then there's also Barefoot Road. And then there's also the engineer Scott Goddard that would like to be let in. He'll be doing the presentation with Mark.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, Kathy, do you want to do you want to, should we go in order, or would you like to just do the quick housekeeping items in case anyone's sitting on regarding 329? And was it 90?
Oh, yeah, if you want to, yeah, if you want to take care of those, sure, that would
Okay,
would be
in case
very
anyone's on
easy.
there.
And then also, I just heard from Leslie Rutan, and Mark Rutan is just got home from work. So he's about to join us momentarily.
Okay, okay. So
So-
while we wait for, actually, so should I have appointed somebody for the last application as a live zoning board member?
Well, we can do it one of two ways, because the hearing has closed. And technically there was just 4 of you, 4 sitting members for that.
Okay,
So not putting words in your mouth, but I don't anticipate that being a problem when you go to make a decision on that
gotcha.
one.
Okay,
But if Mark Rutan, isn't able to get in or whatever for your next one, you definitely would need to appoint somebody. Do you want
Gotcha.
me to talk about those 2 hearings, that one that's being asked to continue and one that's withdrawn, or do you want to go
yes.
to that,
Yeah,
Brad?
yeah, let's do
Okay.
that. Yep. Yep,
Um,
in case anyone's sitting on waiting for those. Yep.
Okay, so the first thing, we received an email this afternoon from the attorney who is representing Newbridge Granite Corp. At 329 West Main Street, and they have requested a continuance to the July 28th meeting. And their site plan wasn't quite in shape yet. We still had some outstanding questions as staff, so they are working on those, and we'll have that, to us and to you between, well in advance of the July 28th meeting. So in order to continue that to July 28th, you need to take a vote on that. But we also need to figure out when you want to start on July 28th. Whether you want to go, there'll now be 2 hearings that night, actually both having to do with 329 West Main Street. So whether you want to start it at 7 o'clock that evening, or if people, prefer 6 o'clock, but that's up to the board.
Okay.
We just have sort of that, and again, I don't think you're going to run into that problem for your July meeting, your July 28th meeting, but we just have to be, aware of, trying to wrap everything up by 9:30.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just writing this down.
Oh, this Mark.
Yep, Mark just hopped on. Okay. I mean, we can, I'm happy continuing this hearing to July 28th. We can definitely discuss when to start afterwards, depending on what we're continuing.
Well, you do
Or
need,
do I have to do it? Do I have
you-
to do it first?
yeah, you need to continue to a specific date and time. So
And
if you want to
time.
hold off on that, Brad, you can. And then we can just go to 90 West Main Street, and you can take care of that now, and then maybe go on to Barefoot Road.
Okay. Okay.
When
So,
you've had
yeah.
a chance to see, if you're going to continue other hearings and what time you want to do that on the 28th.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, we'll TBD the start time for July 28th. Happy to move on to 90 West Main Street.
Okay.
And so Kathy, you did receive a letter asking to withdraw their application without
Yes.
prejudice.
Yes, the applicant about, sort of we're all still in this fog from, February to now, but so I believe it was probably a good month or so ago that the applicant sent an email to staff saying that he was going to withdraw his project. So technically, because it had already been filed and you've advertised a public hearing, what the appropriate step would be is for the board to take a vote to allow the applicant to withdraw without prejudice. So we didn't advertise the hearing. It came in between, that we had originally advertised for a meeting in February and March. Those meetings obviously didn't happen. He withdrew in the meantime, so we did not notify abutters. So there shouldn't be, I'm assuming, but there's really probably is not anyone online for this hearing because we did not advertise it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, I mean, hearing that, would anyone like to make a motion to withdraw the 90 West Main Street application without prejudice?
Mr. Chair, this is Fran. I move that we withdraw the application for 90 West Main Street without prejudice.
Second.
All right, Dick, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And actually, Brad, one of the things, I mean, everyone just did do it by voice, but something with remote meetings, what we do need to do, it's almost like an executive session
Yeah.
where everyone has to, you have to do a roll call. And I apologize, I should have said that at the beginning. So
sure.
when you take a vote, everyone has to do it individually
Okay.
and out loud.
Perfect. So Fran Backstrom made the motion to withdraw without prejudice. Dick Rand seconded the motion without prejudice. Also, Mark Rattan. You're on mute, Mark. Thumbs up. Mark, you're on mute.
I am in favor of the motion. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Paul Tagliaferri.
I'm in favor.
All right. And as the chair, I'm also in favor. So, all right. That's a unanimous decision to withdraw 90 West Main without prejudice. All right. So, moving on, let's go to 5 Barefoot Road. We're going to consider the petition of Berlin Landing Realty Trust for an appeal to build a daycare center with an associated parking lot, which will be leased to an appropriately licensed non-profit entity on the property located at 5 Barefoot Road, map 30, parcel 33, in the Industrial District and Residential C District. And do we have, I don't have a name of the petitioner. I think Kathy, you had mentioned the name earlier, so I apologize.
Yes, actually, Scott Goddard.
Scott Goddard.
Who
Okay.
is on now. And Scott is the petitioner and Mark Donahue is the attorney representing Scott Goddard.
Perfect, thank you. So Mr. Goddard, Mr. Donahue, would you please just state your names and your affiliation with this project, if you will.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mark Donahue from Fletcher Tilton on behalf of the applicant. With me, as Kathy indicated, is Scott Goddard, who's the trustee of Berlin Realty Trust and is also engaged in real estate development. Our petition here is technically framed as an appeal of a decision of the building inspector as it relates to the use of the property at 5 Barefoot Road, proposed for a child care facility. There's 2 issues that are involved in this type of operation, and I don't think there's any disagreement on the first. The second was the grounds for the building inspector's referral of this matter essentially to you. The first is a child care facility is a protected use under Massachusetts zoning law, chapter 48, section 3, the so-called Dover Amendment, in that type of use is exempt from the use provisions of a zoning bylaw. So you have maybe had more familiarity with this with either educational facilities or faith-based organizations, which can go in any zoning district, but the statute also speaks in the same tenor as to child care facilities. And so the proposed structure here is proposed as a child care facility.
as the petition indicated, as a not-for-profit childcare facility. And therefore, the use can go in any zoning district. It's therefore appropriate in the industrial zoning district, which is the zoning district applicable for 5 Barefoot Road. It would be equally true, and I think it's applicable to the second point, equally true that it could go into a residential C zoning district or any other residential zoning district in any part of the town. When that use goes to one of those, however, what the statute says, it's subject to the reasonable regulations of the town as to bulk, height, parking, setbacks, and the like. Reasonable is not decided, however, in the abstract when applying those reasonable regulations to the use. Rather, it's applied factually as to whether it's reasonable under the circumstances, and further, whether it's reasonable as to the impact that it has upon the proposed use, which is exempt for zoning. And therefore, the question isn't whether the bylaw is per se unreasonable in this case, rather it's whether it's unreasonable. Its applicability here is unreasonable in light of the proposed use and its location. That becomes important because the requirement that we're referring to here is a side yard setback requirement. In the industrial zoning district, the applicable side yard setback is 20 feet. And the plan that is part of the package you have, and I can try with a great degree of trepidation to try to screen share something, but I don't know if I'll ever see you again. So I'm a little hesitant to try that, but I can try. Shows that the proposed structure is 20 feet for a side yard setback. However, the zoning bylaw goes on to say that a use or a building in an industrial zoning district where it abuts a residential zoning district needs to have a setback of 100 feet. And that makes good sense for the typical industrial use because you're trying to increase the buffer between an industrial use, which comes with certain criteria as to size and mass and potentially noise, from a residential area. It's really not applicable here where the underlying use, the childcare facility, could in fact go in the residential zone and be as close, if not closer, to any abutter in that scenario than this property. And so we determine that the applicability of the 100-foot setback should be set aside here as to that applicability. There's two other reasons why it should. The first is that the configuration of the property is a somewhat unusual shaped property, and it's dominated candidly by a fairly significant wetland resource area. And the Northborough Conservation Commission has already addressed that resource area and the protection of it as it relates to this potential project. But that means that essentially the building is somewhat hemmed in as to where it can go on the lot. And requiring the building to meet the 100-foot setback would essentially defeat the ability for this use, which is protected under zoning. The second point that needs to be considered is the relocation of the proposed building, not in relation only to the zone line, which essentially tracks the property line, but also to the existing residential structures that it most closely abuts. This site abuts the Pondview Way condominium development. However, the land that surrounds or abuts this side of that site is on one side of Pondview Way, which doesn't have any units until one moves essentially further down Barefoot Road. And therefore, the units there are protected by both their own open space and Pondview Way itself. And therefore, the distances, and Scott may have the specific measurements, is fairly significant to any of the other residences. There are, as to those that are further in the development, if one were to travel down Barefoot Road in more direction, you're talking more than 150 to 200 feet before you get to a residential building. And therefore the impact won't be any greater. And as I said, it's somewhat unique here because as we all, whether we know it or not, would run the risk if one were to characterize as that our property next door could be converted in any of our neighborhoods to a daycare center. So under the circumstances, we believe that the applicability of the 100-foot setback in this case would be deemed unreasonable. And that the determination of this board should be that the compliance of the applicant with the 20-foot setback otherwise required in the industrial zone would be appropriate. Mr. Gardner and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have. And as I said, I do have some plans that I can try to share if the board thinks those are important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Donahue, would it make sense, this is Scott or Mr. Chairman, for me
Sure.
to just briefly walk you through the site plans? I think I can share my screen and give a brief overview of the site and the specific conditions.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. If you're able to do it.
All right. Can you all see that?
Yes, it can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the existing conditions site plan. This is a comparison plan to nearby properties. This is an ortho, and this is the proposed site plan. So I'll go through these 4 plans. In the best order will probably be starting with this. So orientation, Solomon Pond Road. Going north here is the Rotary, and then just beyond that is the mall. Goddard Road to the right, and Barefoot Road to the left. So this is right on the corner of Solomon Pond Road and the Barefoot intersection. The red line outlines the 2-acre, 80,000 square foot industrial lot that we're referring to. You can see to the south, the Pondview Way condominiums with the Pondview Way access, and the nearest residential single-family house off to the left, and right here, which is a detached single-family house. To the north are the industrial properties that you're more familiar with, probably along Barefoot Road. So the existing conditions of the property are shown on this plan. The outline is this irregular shape, dark black line. The wetland line is the green line here, which has been confirmed by the Conservation Commission, up to the 100-foot buffer zones per Concom, with the orange line here. That is existing conditions. The proposed site plan, which has received an order of conditions by Concom, looks like this. The proposed building would get sitting right in here. It's about 3,500 square feet on the first floor. The parking area is running along Barefoot Road with parking and drainage all located within this area. There is an encroachment from the abutter, which is located with this hatch line. That's an existing lawn of the neighboring property, which is not proposed to be altered. So the property line where it says industrial residential is here, here, and here. And this triangle right here is open space owned by the Pondview Way condominium, and Pondview Way proper is to the south of the property line. The green area around the building is the lawn and playgrounds associated with the proposed daycare center, and the traffic flow is going in one way in and out along Barefoot Road. It has full utilities, sewer, water, all right in the street. To show what Mark Donahue was referring to with proximity to abutting properties, this graphic was put together briefly. So this shows proposed daycare building here in gray. The leader line with the arrow going to the left shows labeled 326 to the nearest house. So it's 326 feet to reach that nearest single family dwelling on Pondview Way to the building that's proposed on site. It would be closer to the parking area, which would be right in here, but to the building it's 326. And then to the south, the nearest condominium on Pondview Way is 164 feet to the south, with it being 100 feet to the edge of pavement of Pondview Way. So I think I can stop screen sharing, or I could leave that up for your discussion.
Yeah, so before you drop the screen sharing, I would like to ask our building or zoning enforcement officer, Mr. Federico, a little more background on this, if you can give any more commentary as to why this was denied initially.
Sure. Mr. Donahue actually did a pretty good job of laying out the scope of the situation. This whole thing comes under the Dover Amendment, as he says, it's Chapter 40, Section 3. And the Dover Amendment talks about two things. One is the use of a particular use in any zone. And that is fairly cut and dried in terms of what zones are allowed and what uses are allowed in those zones. Where it gets a little bit nebulous is the quote, reasonable regulations that come into play. You know, reasonableness, I may have to maybe disagree with Mr. Donahue in that what I consider reasonable is what is in the town bylaw that was a while ago brought up by people vetted by the committees and boards, brought to town meeting and brought in as a zoning bylaw for the town. So to go through the boards and committees, town meeting, attorney general approval as well, okay? I don't have the ability to go beyond that. I would consider that to be reasonable because that is the town speaking. If I was to just say, go ahead with the 20 feet, I'd be usurping everything that's in the book. And it's not my book, it's the town's book. And I feel that the appeal through the ZBA is probably the best way to handle this, to put it in your lap as citizens of the town. I've got, again, no problem with the use of the building. That is fairly cut and dried. The reasonable regulations that Mr. Donahue alluded to, he's correct in that, but I think the question comes down to what is a reasonable regulation? And that's what I think you guys are here for tonight. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the 100-foot setback requirement talks specifically about zoning districts, and it does not mention at all any distance between the proposed building and any other existing building in the residential neighborhood. So it's that argument for, you know, we already have a big distance between the proposed building and the condos. I would tend to question that thinking, because I don't think it's germane, or it's in the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw specifically speaks to zoning district boundaries and nothing else. So I think your scope is pretty narrow to the language in the book. And that's about all I have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Federico. So I just wanted to get an understanding of the appeal and your interpretation.
Mhm.
So at this point, I would like to open up to any questions to the board. Again, folks, this is an open hearing. You will have an opportunity to give your input, give your opinion, and just hang tight. But right now, we're just going to let the board members ask any questions to the applicants. So I'm going to open it up to the board. Anyone have any questions?
I have a question, Brad.
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
Is there a reason, maybe this is more for Kathy, but why you wouldn't just look for a variance for the 100-foot setback?
Mr. Gott or Mr. Stone? Or Donahue? Sorry, Donahue. That Stone was the prior applicant.
Sure.
Can I chime in on this one?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Basically, as building official and zoning enforcement officer, I am not willing to grant a building permit until this is resolved. And under the duties of the ZBA, it's your duty to hear appeals in the event that an applicant is or would be denied a permit. So that's the reason why it's an appeal and not a variance.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Fran, yep, go ahead.
No, so I was just getting, so what Bob is saying is he didn't think it rose to the level of requesting a variance, denied it outright, and that's why they're appealing his decision. Is that correct, Bob?
Well, I never said that I would deny or grant a variance, because
Okay.
I cannot do that.
Okay,
But basically, if you look under the section in our own zoning code that talks about the duties of the ZBA, is to hear appeals of a person aggrieved if they cannot obtain a building permit from any other licensing authority in town. And that's your duty. In terms of them asking for a variance, that in my history with this project, that never really came up. And I think in this case, probably an appeal is more proper.
okay, thank you.
And
I have another
if-
question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go
Um,
ahead.
So my question is to the applicant, just because the COVID-19 pandemic changed everything that we think about these days, have you given any thought or reconsideration to this project, given that child daycare centers of 2019 of 2020 and 2021 may look very different than what you have proposed?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I could answer that, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay.
Yes.
And I think that is worthy of consideration for sure. This application was made, and began the process prior to the COVID adventures we've been going on this year. So, prior to bringing this to full fruition, yeah, that needs to be considered. But I'm optimistic that the long-term plans to reinstate the use of childcare facilities will rebound in the time it takes to bring this project to the level of construction. So I'd like to keep on the path that we're on to permitting, and if something changes and it's unable to be constructed, then those applications would be withdrawn, I guess, at some point. There is one other thing I thought I failed to mention earlier about this graphic. Now that we have it up to show you, is so see this. I don't know if you can see my cursor as I move it, but this
Yep.
the yellow line here. What that yellow line is that is the 100-foot setback from the zoning line. So if this red line here is the zone line, and this yellow line is 100-foot back, it shows you that only this corner of the site is more than 100 foot away from the transition line between residential and industrial. So it would effectively render the lot unusable, because that corner is taken up with the wetlands. The usable piece of the property is here, and the adherence to the 25-foot sideline setback and the 20-foot sideline setback per zoning are adhered to and respected with this design. I failed to mention that earlier, so that's all.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, who is that? Sorry.
Mark.
Oh, hey, Mark. Okay. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, what's the square footage of this building approximately?
The footprint's about 3,500 square feet.
Okay.
So just to piggyback on that, is it one floor or is that multiple floors?
I think, well, that would be the 1-floor footprint. If it was multiple floors, it could be more than that.
How many floors are we looking at?
It's proposed to be 2 at the moment, but that could potentially change. But I think the plan as it stands right now is for 2 floors. So if you look here, the footprint of the building is 3,576. That shows it as 1 level. A second level could at most double that square footage of interior space.
So sorry, just before I ask the rest of the board if they have questions. So when you say multiple floors, it's ground floor and then
then
second floor, there's no basement
It's proposed on slab.
on a slab. Okay. Just want to get an idea. Okay, thank you.
And there are architecturals that went along with this as well. I could dig those up if the board would like to see them.
Nope, that's, yeah.
And
Unless
I
anyone
would
else wants to see it, I'm okay. But go ahead. So who's speaking?
It's Mark Donahue. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mark.
I would point out that there is no issue here with regard to the parking. There's been no effort to ask for relief from the parking in any fashion, which would obviously affect what the total square footage of the building could be unless other relief were granted by this board in one form or another.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the board members at this point?
Yeah, Brad, I've got one.
Nope,
Go ahead.
hold on. Dick, you go first, and then Leslie. I heard you, so hang tight.
I have a question of the applicant. Does he have a signed lease with any childcare facility that's a nonprofit?
Different options are being pursued at this opportunity, but there's no executed lease at this time.
So this is a speculative project. What happens if you don't get a lease with a childcare facility?
We don't build it.
Correct.
It only works as a childcare facility. If that building, when constructed, and the applicant is fully aware of this, is not capable without further relief from this board and perhaps others for any other use in any fashion. It's unique to a childcare facility, and there is case law in Massachusetts on that anecdotally, particularly with regard to the closure of churches, which were often built in a similar type of exemption from zoning, but then went to another use, housing or medical use in some fashion, and had to come in compliance in one form or another in order to have that type of conversion. There's no grandfather you get from the not-for-profit exempt use that you can piggyback into the for-profit world.
So are there actually, just to piggyback on that question, are there actually, and forgive my ignorance, are there actually daycare centers, not-for-profit, that liquid to say that if you build it, I will show up and I will take that lease on?
Well, I think we might be getting a little bit far afield. You need to recognize that the use of a childcare facility is an exempt use, and therefore it can be, for example, regardless of whether it's for-profit or not, it can be in a strip mall that otherwise comports to all of the zoning for that type of use in some fashion. This is a little bit unique in that it's a structure being built for a single use and therefore needs to maintain that single use.
Correct. But I mean, the appeal is stating that you're using the Dover Amendment and it is not for profit. So what I'm asking is a not-for-profit daycare center able to front, for lack of a better term, front this saying, yeah, if you build it, I will sign the lease.
Just to clarify, if I might, Mr. Chairman, the statute actually talks only of a child care facility. And therefore, and that only talks about being the primary use for care of children under the age of 7 during the day or on a regular basis as a daycare facility. There are in the industry for-profit daycare centers.
Yeah. Correct. So maybe I'm missing something, but according to the appeal, it's a not-for-profit. You're looking to appeal the building inspectors. So I have a mess here. The appeal is based on the fact that a not-for-profit daycare will be occupying this building. That's what I'm reading on this appeal, unless I'm mistaken.
I do think that was put in there, and Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that we can keep this application open for potentially either use. There were some not-for-profits that have potential interest in this property, but if there was a for-profit, for example, daycare facility, if that would still be allowed under the Dover Amendment, I think it would be beneficial for any decision to reflect that either could be used or just leave that out of the decision. But I'll leave that up to Mark how that's best handled. I think it's better to leave the flexibility for it to be profit or not for profit.
Well, just to echo that, and I'll let Mr. Federico speak to himself, to his point, but I think we're in agreement that a child care facility is the appropriate facility regardless of how monetarily operated under Chapter 48, Section 3. And what his determination, which is the gravamen of the appeal, was that the building as reflected on the plans you saw is not in compliance with the zoning bylaw, and that his determination was that the zoning bylaw, which in this case would require a 100-foot side yard setback, is a reasonable regulation.
Well, I'm digging out of my mess here. Is any other board members have any other questions regarding 5 Barefoot Road?
Yes, I had one quick question.
Oh yeah, sorry, Leslie. Yep, you've been hanging
I won't-
tight. I appreciate
Don't
it.
forget about you. I remember you saying that. All access is from Barefoot Road, nothing from Little Pond Way or Solomon Pond Road.
That's correct. All access from Barefoot Road, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was it.
Mr. Chair, this is Fran. I have
Yes, Fran.
just a follow-up question on the, there's 2 playground areas on the drawings. One shows that it will be fenced in, the other does not. And that is the one closest to the, I think the setback that we're referring to. Can you tell me if that's just an omission on the,
All the play areas are to be fenced in.
okay. Same 5, I think one says 5-foot fencing, so 5-foot fencing.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I would point out that this application, even if this application were to be able to proceed through this board with its determination on the building inspector's ruling, we would still need to go through site plan approval and all the other requirements to be able to build the project.
Correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thank you for adding that. I'll find that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
one of
Federico.
the things that you're probably missing tonight, and don't be alarmed, is that any kind of a groundwater determination in the that comes under Chapter 40, Section 3 is not applicable in this case. So, you know, while we would appreciate and we would encourage the applicant to work with the groundwater committee and the engineers, it is not a requirement. So you won't be seeing a letter from the town engineer as a result of any kind of groundwater advisory committee meeting. Just wanted to
No.
make you aware of that.
No, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I was doing some research on the Dover Amendment the last couple of days, and I know there's something in the House that's still debated. Obviously, it's probably on the back burner based on our current situation as regarding to wetlands and groundwater. So I know that's something that's top of mind for state legislature. But thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Any other comments from town staff or the board before I open it up to Paul? Here you go.
So can you just go through this sort of brief history of this property? Like, you know, when was it purchased? You know, I assume that this is not the first time that you've approached the town with some sort of a plan. Can you just kind of give a brief recap of like your history with this property, Mr. Goodard?
Sure. I don't remember the date of purchase, but I want to guess it was probably about 4 years ago. The wetlands were delineated, went before the Conservation Commission to determine where those wetlands were. There was an application made. I think it was, was it maybe to this board there was a proposal to maybe contemplate putting 2 duplex houses on this property. One where the daycare is proposed and one where the parking lot is proposed. And that was denied. But I want to say that was a zoning board application, right? Because that would have had not been a planning board thing, right? So I can't recall which board it was at, but we did have a proposal that showed 2 duplexes. And that would have been a residential request within an industrial zone. And that request was denied. Then that sort of forced to go back to the drawing boards to consider alternate uses. It's very tricky to fit an industrial building on this property, particularly if we did that, it would be subject to the 100-foot setback in the same footprint of the daycare facility. There is an opportunity, I think, under the industrial zone to put some kind of a throwdown yard for machineries. So that this area where the daycare is proposed could be a place to store heavy machinery, sort of a contractor yard, that kind of thing. So I think that is an allowed use by right, but not a great use, I don't think, for this location being at the intersection of Barefoot and Solomon Pond Road. There's a daycare facility just north of the intersection in Berlin at the roundabout in the Berlin side that is very well attended. So there's a high demand for these types of uses in this area. And this is a major exit route out of Northborough to a highway. So it would be able to service a lot of the businesses and the people that work in the businesses along Barefoot Road, Goddard Road, et cetera, or even people in town going out through Solomon Pond Mall, heading out for the morning to their office. That's why this was considered as an alternative use that fits within the zoning, through the avenue of the Dover Amendment. So a site plan was developed, test pits were done for drainage, all the proper engineering went through. Those are the plans I showed you earlier. One sheet of, it's a more detailed 5-sheet set. So there was a comment about fences and whatnot. There's a whole detailed engineering set that goes along with this that would be subject to planning board review. That went before the Conservation Commission through a notice of intent process, a series of public hearings, and they issued an order of conditions. That's required because the work is proposed within 100 feet to a wetland. That's this light beige line right here showing 100 feet to this blue hatched wetland area. So whenever there's work proposed within 100 feet to a wetland, it requires a permit from the Conservation Commission. And then coming before you all is the next step.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any other questions from the board? Or anything else from town staff?
Sorry, it's Fran again. I just
No,
have
sure.
one additional question. The property line that abuts the residential, you said it was owned by the condominium complex at Pondview Way. Do we know whether it is developable?
So I think that question would have to defer to the folks at Pondview Way, but I believe this triangular space right here is part of their open space plan that was contemplated when the whole Pondview Way was developed some years back.
Thank you.
I'm not stating that with authority. That's my understanding.
I just have a question for Bob. So if since this is zoned as industrial, if they and they wanted to put an industrial, a small, like a similar size building, but used for industrial, they would definitely essentially have to ask for a variance.
Yes.
But there's no variance here because the use is allowed, or
Because-
I'm just trying to understand from what avenue we need to view this case as.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I might be able to help from the applicant's viewpoint.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think the member is accurate. There certainly is the possibility of seeking a variance for this. We felt that the appropriate approach was to technically appeal the building inspector's decision on the reasonableness because given the fact that the use could go in any zoning district, it therefore makes it a different type of use than others that created, I think, the basis for the reason for the added 100 feet. Remember that the setback required in the industrial zone as it relates to other industrial zones is only 20 feet, which is being met here. And remember that the proposed use could go into any residential zone too. We do have the option at some time to try to meet the fairly high burden that the law imposes to try to have a variance. But we felt this was the more appropriate approach and certainly didn't do it in a fashion that would preclude us in the future from seeking that relief.
That's true.
Okay, thank you.
Brad?
Yeah, so I mean, going back to what I was saying, and I'm only looking at Wikipedia right now, so it's one of the most trusted sites on the internet. But it's saying the Dover Amendment is it's appropriately licensed for nonprofit entity. Your application, your appeal is saying nonprofit. So, but you just mentioned a few minutes ago that it may be for profit. That doesn't fit under the Dover Amendment, in my opinion. Can you clarify your response?
Mark, are you able to speak to that?
Well, I think that there's a whole process here that we have to kind of keep in mind. What the building inspector has, I think, concurred that the use falls under the Dover Amendment, but that the reasonable regulations of the town preclude that. If this board were to grant the relief sought, and we were to proceed after going through site plan approval and everything else and seek a building permit, we would need to affirm to the building inspector's satisfaction that we continue to meet the required use of a child care facility. A child care facility, as the language of the statute, does not mandate a not-for-profit use. We did make reference, because it was the intent when this process started in the fall of last year, that it would be a not-for-profit. But we will need to demonstrate to the building inspector at the time we seek a building permit that the child care facility meets the definition of a child care center, which is defined in Chapter 15D of Massachusetts general laws. So the only issue here is whether the building can go where it can go. It's not that a building permit must issue for the proposed use. This is the next sequential step, so that the applicant, should this board grant the relief, can prepare the detailed plans, submit them for site plan review, obtain that, then submit an application for building permit, and demonstrate, to the extent that it is seeking a demonstration that it exempt from zoning, that it meets that standard of the use is exempt from zoning to the satisfaction of the building inspector. And if he finds that it does not, then he would deny the building permit, and we would have to have that determined if it became an issue. But I don't think it will be.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair, that's something that has happened in other situations around town where,
Right.
you know, I can grant the building permit only with certain authority and documentation from the state. And that, you know, with the building permit comes the use permit as well. So that's one of the things that I would be looking for, is sufficient documentation from the state and articles of incorporation. You know, it's a whole other layer of business documents that I need to see. Excuse me, to ensure that, you know, what is the status of the corporation that's going in there. So that is part of the building permit submission.
Process. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. I know we're, gosh, we are. So I know we're short on time here. So any other final questions or comments from the board or staff before I open up to the public for comments?
Brad,
Yep. Oh yeah,
I just wanted to point out that there were two specific letters that the board did receive, and you know, even though having this remote meeting is certainly different than all of us sitting in the conference room, but we always, as staff, just point out the correspondence that you have received on any application. So on this particular application, there are two pieces of correspondence. One is from attorney Mary Bassett, and I believe that that Mary is is one of the attendees, and I think that she wants to speak to her letter. And then we also received a letter from an abutter, Actually, they're across the street at 10 Barefoot Road. And they submitted, it's Christopher Egan on behalf of 10 Bear LLC. And he wrote a brief letter in support of this application. But again, you have a rather lengthy letter from Attorney Bassett.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy. All right. Looks like, David, our IT guru, is going to be handling most of this, but I do see a hand up under attendees. So David, would you mind?
Shall I keep the screen share alive or shall I stop the share?
You can stop the share, please,
Okay.
if you will. Thanks. So one of the attendees, we have Mitch Blasco.
Hi, how's it going?
Mr. Blasco, would you mind just stating your name for the record and your address?
My name's Mitchell Blasco, and I'm the property owner of 18 Pondview Way, Northborough.
Okay, thank you. And again, I just appreciate you try to be as succinct as possible. We're short on time, but I definitely want to get everyone's input.
Of course.
I appreciate your
so
time.
I just wanted to say a few things. So listening to their plan on their end, what I don't like is how a lot of this is built off of optimism, and that they're basically going against what they're already applying for, which is for a nonprofit business. But then they're saying, well, it could be for profit and we could also add these businesses. So what we're looking to do is slip by this so we can keep trying to slip by everyone else and eventually get to what we're looking for in the end, which is a bunch of profitable businesses. And even though it lies on Barefoot Road, it is still, as you can see in the pictures, abutting right up on Pondview Way. Therefore, it will affect the property values of our street, along especially with the house right on the corner. And I don't know too much about this, but I also know that adverse possession is available law in Massachusetts. And that fenced-in property has been occupied for well more than 20 years. So I don't know if that's a route that that neighbor can also take on her own end to prevent this from happening. That's all I have to say for now.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your input. All right. Let's see. Any other hands, questions, comments? Okay, Mary Bassett. All right, Ms. Bassett, are you there?
I am.
All right, would you mind just stating your name and address for the record? And again, just a friendly reminder, just to try and be succinct. We're short on time, but I want to hear your input.
Yes, it is difficult. I can't see myself on the video, but can you see me? Okay.
Well, I mean, no, I can't see you, but
You
I can.
can't. Okay, that's fine.
You're okay.
That's fine. Actually, I am a direct abutter to that Barefoot Road property, and actually strenuously object to the allowance of this. What it is, of course, is a zoning waiver request that they have put in for that site. You know, the issuance of that kind of a waiver from an entire setback zoning requirement it's just a derogation of the application of zoning law, and the application of the zoning amendment does not, the Dover amendment does not make any difference here. And that is, I say, to try to be succinct, one of the bottom lines of the argument here is, you know, what they have is an unbuildable lot, has always has been an unbuildable lot, has been taxed that way by the town. Is, as you saw by that ortho look, that the picture that he showed you, you know, what kind of a I say a shape it has. The only reason you see the building where it is on this plan is because that's where they could put a building that would be outside of the wetlands. So their use of the property is constricted by the shape of it, by the wetlands itself, and has nothing to do with the so-called Dover Amendment use. This is new construction on a vacant lot that has to comply with zoning. And the zoning that we're talking about has nothing to do with whether it's a daycare center or a church or a school or a whatever could be used. The zoning bylaw that we're looking at says that anything built in that zoning district has to have the 100-foot setback. If you will look at the plan that they presented, 100% of the building is not in compliance. So do you know what I'm saying here? Is not one part of that building complies with the 100-foot setback of the zoning compliance. So we're not looking at any kind of matter of degrees or quote, relief for this particular use. I say looking for a complete waiver, which is not appropriate. And this argument that I think council raised about, something about, again, they're very good at what I call bootstrap arguments, but well, because we could use a daycare center in a residential facility, that it doesn't matter that we have these setback requirements. And of course, we don't look at zoning that way. You don't look at what is actually, you look at under the rules, what is being proposed. Again, the arguments looking at the distance from their building to one of the condo owners. Again, we don't look at things that way. There's not, and if you were actually, I won't argue that further, except to certainly support Mr. Frederico's interpretation of the zoning bylaw. This is that kind of a zoning bylaw that is reasonable. It is for the general health benefit and welfare of the general community. It's not specifically against daycare facilities. It has this general application, and that's why, of course, they even say in their letter, their June 5th, 2019 letter, well, arguably this is kind of reasonable and serves a legitimate purpose, but when we can't use the property for what we want to use it for, well, of course, then it shouldn't apply anymore. But that's not the way it works. You can't concede that it's per se reasonable and only unreasonable when applied to them. The applicant wants to blame the zoning bylaw for the inability to build a proposed building on the lot, when the actual inability to build arises from the lot itself: small size, odd shape, presence of wetlands. We know, and you briefly alluded to, that decision you're looking for is the ZBA's case number 1707, which again was this particular applicant trying to get some use out of this property. And he bought the property for the $10,000, and you can do all the engineering in the world here to see if he can get something approved, which is exactly, again, why you wonder, like, why this building here? It's there. It said, first give us a building that complies with Conservation Commission, because that was probably harder, to get through here. But how do you propose a building that is 100% outside of zoning compliance? The Dover Amendment only speaks to the use of the property being exempt. As a matter of fact, the grand bargain the state cut with the 351 municipalities was that you have to allow churches and schools and now daycare facilities, but you can apply all your other zoning regulations. And it says zoning regulation, it says in the statute reasonable zoning. Well, of course, only reasonable zoning regulations can be applied. So it does not say that the use of the property for Dover Amendment use makes the property exempt from zoning. Not one way, shape, or form. And I don't see where the board has any authority to do that. So I would just ask the board to not allow this waiver. There's no legal authority for it. I did try to in the letter, which I won't go into. You know, the applicant cites some law that would make your ruling appropriate. There's nothing further from the case. Please, I would just ask you again, in the interest of time, I am not going to you
No, I
know.
appreciate your time. No, I appreciate your comments, Ms. Bassett. I don't mean to cut you off. We just need to move along, but thank you. I appreciate your
Alright.
comments.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments. We have another individual who would like to speak, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien, Brett O'Brien, would you mind just stating your name and address for the record?
I live at 111 Brigham Street, but I also own 44 Barefoot Road right there on the street. And, you know, I think that the project is actually a very positive thing for the town and for, you know, for that area as well. I think in terms of both, you know, residential and commercial values, I think access to daycare is positive, you know, for property values. I don't think it's a negative impact. I think there's sort of the perception here that somehow it would be a negative thing to have a daycare building. And I think it's actually the opposite. I think whether it's, you know, for my office building on Barefoot Road or for the, you know, the residential houses in Northborough, I think, you know, access to daycare is one of the things people take into consideration when moving to a community. So I'm very much in favor of it.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Appreciate that. All right, we have another individual, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Donovan, would you please state your name and address for the record? And
sure, my name is William Donovan. I reside at 3B Pondview Way. I'd just like to put in the record the tax map 30 that shows parcel 33. This map was completed on 10/19 of 2006 by the James W. Sewell Company. And it actually shows the parking lot of this project being located on that wetland within that map. So I just wanted to state that. Several years ago, I think Scott, the applicant, mentioned 4 years ago, he brought in front of the zoning board an application for 2 duplexes on this site, and that was denied. I also believe that this petition for a waiver should be denied. You know, the purchase of the lot was at a minimal cost, and now he's trying to build himself a nice little profit there. I'd also like to say that within a 15-mile radius of this site, there are 18 daycare centers. So you can do the math. There are quite a few daycare centers within this area. And I just, you know, in trying to keep this meeting short, I just don't think the building of the EEE daycare should be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a few more comments. We have a comment from Rick. Rick, would you mind just stating your full name and your address for the record? Hold on, Rick. Does Rick have himself muted?
Needs to unmute
No.
himself.
Can you hear
There
me
you go.
now?
Yes.
I sound like a phone commercial. Okay, my name is Richard McWilliams, and I live at 5B Pondview Way, and I am very much opposed to this project, and I'm not going to repeat the reasons that have already been stated, other than to say I don't think it conforms with zoning. I also have both noise concerns, since my unit happens to be the one that is probably the closest to the project, and traffic concerns. And I know that that's not part of this meeting, but I'm very much opposed to it. And that I'll let it go at that.
Okay, thank you. And then Henry I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name. It's SQU. If you wouldn't mind.
Henry Squilanti, 72 Crestwood Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Squilanti.
This is the second project that's come before the town in the last couple of months under the Dover Amendment. I had a question a couple of weeks ago, which couldn't be answered. If they build under the Dover Amendment and then cannot find an educational or nonprofit, what keeps them from putting another company in, coming before the boards and saying, we have a hardship now, we built a building, we need to put something besides an educational. Now, also, if they're a nonprofit and the nonprofit company owns the property, you don't get real estate taxes for that piece of property. If they're a 501c3 organization, they cannot be taxed real estate. I think I asked Bob that a couple of weeks ago with Cedar Street about whether the Dover Amendment goes with the building. If they can't find someone that comes under the Dover Amendment, can anybody go in those buildings? No, you shake your head no, Bob?
That's a good question. Yeah, so Bob or Kathy, would you be able to answer that? Oh, Bob, here you go.
My take on it is that if you build it and they can't find any Dover Amendment qualified people to go in there, that building needs to stay vacant until they find a use that would be appropriate to that particular zoning district. So in this particular case, if you were to build it as a daycare center, which is essentially just a bunch of big rooms, and they couldn't, excuse me, and they couldn't get somebody in there that qualifies under the Dover Amendment, that building would have to be used only if it's allowed with the underlying district, which would revert back to an industrial use. Okay, and in Northborough, uses in the industrial zone, there are a few allowed by right, but most of them are special permit.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of whether it's taxable property or not, I don't have the smarts to make that determination.
If a 501c3 organization is exempt from real estate taxes.
If you say so, I'm a zoning guy, I'm not an assessor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Squilante. I'm going to take, just in the sake of time, I know we have 4 more questions. I'm going to take these last 4. If you don't mind just keeping them as succinct as possible. Gene Coyne, if you don't mind. Here we go.
Apparently Gene is using an old version of Zoom and is not going to be able to talk.
All right. Rich Harnett?
No, go ahead, talk.
Can you hear
Gene
me
Coyne,
now?
are you there? Oh, there's
Yeah.
Gene. Okay.
Jean Coyne, I'm 1D Pondview Way and a butter. And I just wanted to say that I am very much against having this. It's already a busy intersection there. There's also a new building going up on Goddard and Solomon Pond Road to add to the traffic. And I'll go along with all the rest, the things that have been said about the vacant building, about COVID. It's been unstable for daycares now. So there's a lot of different reasons why I'm objecting to it. And that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Then Rich Harnett.
I think sort of the same as everybody else has been saying. Rich Harnett, 1A Pondview Way. For all the aforementioned discussion and topic, I oppose to this project going forward.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to take 2 more. Phyllis, I sound like I'm a radio DJ. 2 more calls here on this one, but I appreciate everyone's feedback. Phyllis, if you wouldn't mind stating your full name and address for the record.
I'm Phyllis Samard. I'm 1C Pondview Way, and I do not agree with the building of the building as a daycare center. I think it's a very unfortunate location for children because it's very buggy, because it's wetlands. And there is the potential of a child running away and going into the wetlands. And the water is deep enough that the child could drown. I think that they could find a more appropriate location for a children's facility.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, last comment from the audience, Carrie Weber. Carrie, would you mind just stating your name and address for the record?
Yes, hi. This is Carrie Weber. I'm at 7D Pondview Way, also on a butter, and also want to lend my voice in opposition to this project. This seems like, this is really ill-advised and just not a good use for this space in any way, shape, or form. The applicant is simply trying to recoup his investment, which is extremely low. So he would be better off simply offering that lot up for sale and ridding himself of that rather than trying to shoehorn in an inappropriate and ill-advised project. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that's all we're going to take as far as comments. I appreciate Michelle and Layla. I'm sorry, we just have to keep moving along, just time restrictions. But any other final comments from the board or the staff at this point? Okay.
That we close the hearing?
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, yeah, any final comments from the applicant? I'll give one final comment if you don't mind, Mr. Donahue, just trying to keep it succinct.
Well, I guess I'll do my best. Most particularly, we had not had the opportunity to see Ms. Bassett's letter that you have until literally just now. And if the board believes it would be helpful, we're glad to continue to your next meeting and provide a written response. The reason I think it might be helpful to you is, with all deference to the discretion you have, the facts of the matter of this case is that upholding the decision of the building inspector means that the exempt use under Chapter 48, Section 3 cannot proceed on this property. That is not what I believe the law shows as a reasonable result, nor is it consistent with a line of cases under Massachusetts law, which have made it very clear that the dimensional requirements can't preclude an exempt use. But that is the end result here. And so if it would be helpful, the applicant would be willing to continue and provide a written reply pointing to the case law that we think compels the board to determine that the 20-foot setback otherwise applicable is a reasonable regular requirement to be met.
Okay, well, I will leave that up to my board members to decide whether they would wish to continue or to close the hearing. I will leave it up to the rest of you guys, rest of you folks.
All right, well, I'll withdraw my second because I think that in fairness, there should be an opportunity to respond.
I would agree with that. Out of respect for the applicant, I think they should be given an opportunity to come back with whatever they would like to.
Mr. Chair, I would agree with that as well.
Mr. Chair, I would agree with that as well, too.
Yep, same here.
Okay.
Well, then I move that we continue the hearing for the 5 Barefoot Road application to the meeting on July 28th at 7 p.m.
We haven't decided what time yet, though.
Well,
Fran,
we have
but
to, so it'll be about 7 o'clock. I mean, we know we're going to be there at 7. We might be there earlier, but we'll definitely be there at 7.
we will be there at 7. Okay, I just want to make sure we're doing
Is that all right,
everything by the
Kathy?
book.
But I just want to point out that if you, and again, up to the board, but if you decide to start your meeting at 6 and finish whatever hearing you have at 6, you know, just as a, you know, an extreme example, you finish at 6:15 and you continue this till 7, you don't have anything to do until 7. You can't move this up. So how we advertise the hearings is we advertise them all for the same time. So that, you know, I mean, and we don't have to re-advertise this, but, you know, you could, if you just wanted, again, to continue your meeting, you know, start your meeting at 6, you could continue, you know, whatever hearings you have tonight until 6. Or if you want to start at 7, you know, continue it to 7, but I wouldn't lock yourself into a time beyond when you're going to start.
I would agree. Are we starting the next meeting at 6 or at 7, guys?
I'm fine with 6.
I'm fine either way.
I will make 6.
Okay, all right, then I will repeat, and I move that we continue the hearing for 5 Barefoot Road to our July 28th, 2020 meeting at 6 p.m.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Roll call.
Aye.
Yeah,
Roll call.
Paul, do you get, so let's go by individually. So Fran made the motion, Mark seconded.
Aye.
Dick, did you, you're in favor, 6 p.m., July 28th?
Aye.
Okay, Paul?
Aye.
Leslie?
I'll get to vote.
Jeff? Just want to make sure we're all on board.
I'm on
Okay, just
vacation
in
that
case.
week, so I will most likely not be there, especially if it's at 6, but
Okay.
I'm out
And
that
I
week.
am also in favor as the chair. So, all right, unanimous vote for July 28th, Tuesday, July 28th at 6 p.m. We are going to continue the petition for 5 Barefoot Road. Thank you, everybody who
Thank you.
participated. Thank you for your comments. And we'll see you next month.
Brad, before you go to your next hearing, do you want to just take care of that request to continue? Again,
Yes.
I don't know that anyone is, you know, still, you know, that might have called in on that, but now that you have a specific time, if you just want to continue that.
Okay,
Yep,
Mr.
3:29.
To 6 p.m.
Yep,
Mr.
perfect.
Chair, I move that we continue the hearing for 329 West Main Street to our July 28th, 2020 meeting at 6 p.m.
I'll second.
Okay, Mark seconded. All those in favor?
Roll call.
Here we go.
Aye, I agree.
Paul is on board. Mark, you seconded. Dick, are you on board?
Aye.
Aye. Jeff and Leslie?
I'll be there.
Leslie, all right, Leslie, you're on vacation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Little housekeeping. Okay. Moving on. Now, we are going to move to consider the petition of Jeffrey Faulkner, I hope I pronounced that correctly, for a variance special permit with site plan approval for the construction of a 724 square foot accessory dwelling unit to the existing single family house on the property located at 82 Coolidge Circle, map 7, parcel 29, in the residential B district and groundwater protection overlay district 3. Mr. Faulkner, I can see you're on. There you are. All right.
Brad, I also think that Jeff's engineer, John Grenier,
That's correct.
is on or should be on.
Maybe attendees. David, if you see him, just
yeah,
come over to the panelist. There you go.
He is on. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So, Mr. Faulkner, Mr. Grenier, if you don't mind just stating your name and address for the record, and please continue with your application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Grenier, on behalf of the Faulkner family, I am the engineer who has been working with them and their builder during the permitting process for this project. The Faulkners have lived at this location for a number of years. They've raised their family there. They've raised their kids. This has been a family home for a number of years. It's an existing split level ranch type house on a 1 acre lot located at 82 Coolidge Circle. In the recent history, they are looking to do what would be a 16 by 22 addition. And I can bring up, Kathy, I can bring up site plans just to go through with the board. If you hand over the reins, hopefully I can do it. Share screen. Can you, here we go. Share. All right, can you see my screen now? Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah, now it's up, John.
Okay, thank you very much. So here is the Faulkner's lot. Their existing home is right here. As I said, it's a split level. The garage is located on the southerly side, and what they are proposing to add to the existing home is an addition right here. That's 16 by 22. The footprint of that is about 352 square feet. On what would be the basement elevation of that, let me go to, let me close out of that. I'll close this. If it'll open. Let me rotate this. Now I can zoom in a little bit on it, hopefully. It's not letting me zoom. Well, I think I can show you from here.
I think if you use the plus sign on the right side of the screen, there was a plus sign over there. It's gone now, but it was there before. There you go.
Oh, no, it's not showing up on my side of the screen. That's
on the far right,
lower
right corner. You don't see.
No, it's not.
Lower right.
All your pictures are on the right side of my screen.
You need to slide those pictures to the left, and then the plus sign will be.
Here we go. I see. This is my first time driving during one of these meetings, so you have to bear with me a little bit. Usually I just sit and talk.
No, it's
okay,
fine.
so here we go. So here's the existing garage. This is the existing footprint right here. And here is that 16 by 22 foot addition that they're looking to add on to the house. And I'd point out that the existing space right here, this is already existing finished lower level space. So that is a finished portion of the existing house. What they are looking to do is I don't know if it's Jeffrey's mother or mother-in-law, when she comes up, she stays with the family. They are looking to, and she has been staying with the family, is to give her some private area where she can live and stay with them for extended periods of time. So it's more of a little in-law area. So with that, they are adding in the addition portion, that would be a bedroom.
and a small bath and a walk-in closet. And then the area that is already finished, they are going to convert that into a kitchen area, and then they'll have a little utility area and a mudroom and a living room. So that's going to be converted from what is, I think, they have an existing den, a little family room and a bathroom. So the increased addition area is about 350 square feet or 352 square feet. And the existing finished area that's being converted is about 372 square feet. So that gives them that total area that will be for the comfort of his mother and mother-in-law is a total of 724 square feet. So for this use, we need I believe, a special permit with site plan approval. And in the regulation, it states that I believe no more than 25% of the total living area or house area can be dedicated towards an additional dwelling unit. That would have capped them out at 700 square feet. And it just so happens that the area, if they frame this out, would be a total of 724 square feet. So in the scope of it, it's really negligible, but by the letter of the regulation, they would be capped out at 25% or 700 square feet. This total living area is 724 square feet. So they're looking for relief for an additional 24 square feet, which in our opinion is really negligible for the scope of the project. You know, the living areas aren't that huge. They're trying to give her a little comfortable space, and this works out nicely for her. And we don't think that that would really be a detriment to you know, the neighbors or the neighborhood. You know, if they had to comply, they would end up taking an interior partition wall or a framed wall and bumping it in, you know, 6 inches or a foot somewhere around the perimeter. So it would have no effect on anyone really, except for squeezing the small living area for his mother-in-law from what she has right now. In terms of other permits, we were before all this COVID craziness started. We went to the Conservation Commission. We did get approval from the Conservation Commission for the small addition that's on the northern side of the property. There was the septic system needed to be, it wasn't in good shape. There were issues with groundwater and with the addition of a bedroom for the mother-in-law. The septic system would have to be expanded. So we did plans with the Board of Health. That was approved, and that septic system has been installed. So they proceeded with what they could during all of the delays because of COVID. They were able to go along with construction for the septic system, so that is complete. Because they were adding, what threw them into having an additional dwelling unit was because they were going to install the kitchen. If this were just a regular addition and the mother-in-law was going to share the main kitchen upstairs, we wouldn't be here. Because they were installing the small little kitchenette for her, it crossed the line into being an additional dwelling or an additional unit on this. So that threw us into the Zoning Board of Appeals realm. But the purpose of this is just so she has a little, she doesn't have to share the kitchen. She can have her own space down in the first lower level of the split level ranch. So she has her own little area to sleep and kind of detach from the rest of the family, should she choose so. I don't know if Jeffrey has anything to add to that, but that's the nuts and bolts of our appeal for a special permit and a variance.
And again, the variance is for the additional 24 square feet, which throws them over the 25% maximum area of living space. I'd put to Jeffrey, do you have anything you'd like to add to that for the benefit of the board?
No, I think you covered it well. I mean, again, really the intent of this was to give my mother-in-law her own space when she comes up. She's a widow. My father-in-law passed away a couple years ago, and since then we've been trying to figure out ways to, to be closer to and help her through during this time. So that's why we were planning to move forward with the project. And yeah, I mean, it's really the whole intent.
Okay, with that, I put it back to the chair if anyone has any questions or comments.
Yeah, I mean, before I open it up, I mean, I totally sympathize. In my occupation is one of those issues is how do you help the boomers as they're starting to retire, things like that. So I definitely sympathize and appreciate what you're doing here and just coming asking for an extra 24 feet. I really appreciate that. That being said, I'm going to open up to the board with any questions or comments. I mean, my main question was the septic system, but it sounds like you already had that taken care of.
Yeah.
Anything else though from my colleagues here?
Just one question. Can you confirm what's the current square footage of the house as it exists today?
Oh, let me get my calculator out there. They would be maxed out at a total of 700 square feet. So if that's 25%, it would be a total of 2,800 square feet. And I don't know if Bob can chime in. Is that gross floor area, Bob? Because that I would assume that has to include the garage.
It talks about gross floor area of the building. So, we try to be as generous as we can in terms of the overall size of the building. There is a 25% escape, if you will, but that's 25% of the total floor space after all the projects are done, which would still exceed it. So the 724, I think, is the same, is pretty correct. One thing I want to add is we tried awfully hard to find 24 square feet that we didn't have to count to avoid the variance. We just couldn't come up with that little bit. The other thing I just want to add for clarity is that the accessory dwelling unit is, if you imagine a split level house, the accessory dwelling unit's on the bottom level. The main house is going to be the entire second level of the house. Okay, so it's not going to be a section here and a section here. It's a section on one level, and then there's a section on the upper level. Okay, just to give you some clarity in terms of what the configuration of the spaces is going to be.
Right. So here's a quick cross section. There's that's the lower level where the additional living area is going to be, and then there is an upper level, which is above the garage. But so I think Bob confirmed that the gross floor area, that the 25% is being taken off, includes both floors, and on that lower level, that also includes the garage area, because that would be part of the gross floor area.
So, Mr. Chair, I just for clarification.
Sorry, yes, Fran.
All right, so
no, hold on. Paul, Fran's gonna go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead, Fran.
Okay. All right, so just real quick. I mean, the zoning says that it's either 25% of the existing dwelling or 700 feet, whichever is greater. So if the house is 2,800 feet, it's 700 is both 25% and the maximum. So I'm just the house has to be smaller than. I'm just trying to figure out why 724 needs a variance.
I think I think, doesn't it say Or 700 square feet, so 700 square feet is the maximum.
No, it's
Whichever is larger.
Oh,
Whichever
whichever is
larger.
large.
yeah. So that's why it's really important how big is the actual existing dwelling, because if it's only
It's definitely
2,800
smaller than that. It's definitely smaller. There's no way that this house is, I only have the floor plan for this lower level. Jeffrey, do you know off the top of your head what the total square footage of your house is?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Brad, if I could, I don't know what the exact square footage is either, but and not to put Bob on the spot, but when this first came in, and I think John Grenier, just did obviously quick math for us, assuming that it was 700 square feet, but I think the house is definitely less than 2,800 square feet, because the big discussion has been for months is because we weren't meeting, during the initial stages of the pandemic. The big discussion, like Bob said, was how do we get rid of 24 square feet?
Okay.
How can we help this applicant out? So the variance is definitely needed for the 24 square feet.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
To reiterate on that too, is I was assuming that the threshold was the 25%, but I think the house is smaller. It's definitely smaller. The house is, if I had to guess, it's probably 1,800 square feet. So what would be the dictating number would be the 700 square feet, because the house is definitely smaller. There's no way that house is 2,800 square feet. I was assuming that was the threshold, but if I had to guess, it's probably like 1,800 square feet.
All right, thank you. That makes sense.
Just so according to the tax assessor's office, it's 1,200 square feet of finished area, which probably doesn't include the garage as well.
Okay.
And it's on roughly an acre of property.
Thanks, Paul.
In the end, the finished space will be about 1,900, give or take.
Yeah.
Including the garage.
Not including garage.
I think the total finished area that, with the architect, I think he had, there was 352 of addition, and I thought he had, he might be taking out some of the storage areas. I think he had some of the other finished space as like 372, so it was a total of 724. But he may have backed out some of the storage and the stairs and whatnot.
Okay, I'm good for my question.
And then Brad, I just wanted to point out there was only one letter as far as, and actually, I'm sorry, you may still be doing board questions. I jumped in.
No. Hop on
I
in.
just wanted to just to point out there was so there's only one letter from staff from our fire chief, and he doesn't have any issues with the addition.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other questions from the board or the staff before I open it up to the public?
None for me.
Open away.
All right. As they say on Sports Talk Radio, release the hounds. No. Any questions or comments regarding 82 Coolidge Circle? Okay, hearing none. Hearing none.
Make a motion to close the hearing?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Dick made a motion to close it. Mark seconded that motion. All those in favor? And sorry, I have the wrong view. All right, all those in favor? Let's start it up. Fran?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Dick and Mark. All right, I say aye.
Aye.
Leslie, Jeff?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, this motion is closed. Thank you very much for your time, folks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too.
You too.
Mr. Chair, can I request a 5-minute break?
Yes, you may. Do a 5-minute recess. Everyone can turn off their cameras and unmute yourselves, please. 5-minute recess. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
And then actually mute yourself.
And please unmute yourself. Or please mute yourself. Thank you, Fran. Thank you. All right, we got a 2-minute warning here.
5 minutes goes by a lot faster than I remember it.
All right. Once we get everyone back online, we will reconvene.
Your video's off, Brad, if you care.
Oh, I am. Thank you, Leslie.
Right, just so you know, I have to recuse myself from 1 Lyman Street.
Yes. Yeah. Kathy let me know. So Kathy, I read the application and then.
Yeah, just the public hearing notice.
Yep, the notice. Thank you.
And then, but actually before, well, I mean, you can read the notice and then announce that Dick has to recuse himself and then appoint one of the alternates.
Okay.
And then also, Brad, too, just before we start, if David can elevate, there's 3 people to participants. Marshall Gould is the attorney on this project. Mike Sullivan is the engineer, and Jeff Yang is the applicant and owner of the company. And I believe all 3 are on right now as attendees.
Sorry, what was the third name?
Jeff Yang.
Jeff Jang.
Jang, I'm sorry, Jeff Jang.
It's
Okay.
Marshall. Hey, Marshall.
Thank you.
Hello.
You said Michael Sullivan and Jeff Yang?
Yes.
All right, just want to write these names down.
And actually, I pronounced Jeff's last name incorrectly. So you do pronounce the J, Jeff Jang. Jang, correct, Marshall?
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
All right, I've done it wrong too, Kathy.
All right. All right, we're all on. Okay. So longer than 5 minutes, but appreciate your patience, everybody. So now we are going to continue with the meeting to consider the petition of Cable Matters, Inc. for a variance special permit to allow the construction of a 20,000 square foot building, including 17,000 of warehouse space and 3,000 square feet of first and second floor office space on the property located at 1 Lyman Street, map 66-9, 10 and 11, parcels 66-9, 10 and 11 in the industrial district and groundwater protection overlay district area 1. So before we begin, Mr. Dick Rand has to recuse himself from this hearing. And Jeff Leland, alternate on zoning board. You there? There you are. Okay. He is now a voting member for the zoning board for this petition. So moving forward, Mr. Gould,
Right.
Mr. Yang, and Mr. Sullivan, would you please state your names and proceed with your hearing or your petition?
I do not see Mike Sullivan on here. I just want to make sure that he is.
He's there. I see him.
He's on,
I'm here.
Marshall.
Can you hear me?
He's on.
All right. And just to correct the record of one thing, Mr. Chairman, I think you said a variance and special permit. It's just the variance. Not
Just okay, yeah. So all the hearings state special word, but it is a variance for groundwater. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
So-
for clarifying that. So, Mr. Gould, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. What I would like to do is just sort of tell you how we'll be doing the presentation here. I'm going to start with some information about Cable Matters. I think it's very important to know who they are and what they do. And then I'll talk a little bit about the property location, just showing you a couple of maps. Mike will then go to the engineering, and then it will come back to me and I will go over specifically the petition and the points that need to be shown for a variance. So to start, I would like to start by, I don't see Jeff Jing's picture up there, but I see his name. So let me just tell you a little bit about Jeff and about his company. The company Cable Matters, Inc. is wholly owned by Jeff. It is a Massachusetts corporation. Jeff is the founder and the sole owner of the company. Jeff has several, there he is, several graduate degrees, including a master's in computer engineering in 2020. And he has worked as a software engineer from the time of that degree to the founding of Cable Matters. Cable Matters was started approximately 10 or 11 years ago. It's actually got two parts to the company. Right now, their United States office is in Southborough, and they are in an office park there, and they have approximately 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of office space, and they've got about 5,000 square feet of warehouse. Jeff currently has he currently has two divisions of his company. He's got a representative office in China, and they do sourcing, research and development, design, and logistics. What they do is nobody in the company does the manufacturing of any product. Those are all sourced directly from about 30 different suppliers, mostly in China and in Thailand. Cable Matters is one of the highest rated brands and vendors on Amazon. They do business in 8 countries, including the US, Canada, England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Japan. Most of their goods are sold and delivered through Amazon. Approximately 99% of their product goes directly to Amazon and is then delivered to customers through Amazon. Cable Matters, they use top quality components and they test their products in real world condition, and they are trusted in real world by leading organizations in technology, education, government, aerospace, medical, and other related industries. Right now, here in Massachusetts, they have 9 employees, and of those, there are 5 of them that have master's degrees, so these are not low-level people. And what they do is they work on distribution and sales of products, but they don't do any distribution from Northborough. They answer questions about the products, and the products, as I say, are primarily coming from Asia and they're going to Amazon. But for some local business customers, they do require warehouse space here, and that warehouse space typically has a visit from the UPS truck, and that is typically 1 to 2 times a day. They will either deliver product or they will pick up product. The company employs a total of 9 people. If they get this additional, if they get this permitting completed in Northborough, they're going to move out of the rented space in Southborough, and they will move into the proposed building, which is a 20,000 square foot footprint on the building. There are going to be 17,000 square feet of warehouse. And on the first floor, there will be 3,000 square feet of office, and directly above it, another 3,000 square feet of office. That will include stairwells and storage and other matters. The office in China that does their research and development, they have approximately 20 or slightly over 20 employees. What Jeff would like to do is make the board aware that his building and his business is unique. No customers come to the building. They occasionally have suppliers that might come in, 1 to potentially 2 people at a time. The deliveries both to and from this building are typically done by UPS, and Amazon will deliver them office supplies, and they may deliver them product that they need, but they don't ship out of Amazon directly from this company. The average of deliveries per day is 2 to 3 deliveries, either inbound or outbound per day. And those are by straight trucks, the same type of UPS trucks or Amazon trucks that would come to anybody's home, not the big tractor trailers. Currently, their business operates with 1 tractor trailer coming in every 2 months. With this newer and larger location, it is possible they may increase that to 1 tractor trailer a month, but that is not a major part of their business. That's simply to reload their warehouse for local customers. They do about 50 customers per day that go out from the local warehouse. So when UPS comes to pick things up, they in turn will deliver. The company has no combustibles. They have no liquids. It's what's called dry storage. I will show you their product in a minute. All their products are connectivity products, cables, adapters, and docking stations. We are here before the zoning board because we need a variance. We need a variance because 2 reasons. Primarily, we are in a groundwater area 1. And in order to do anything other than the residence that is there, we need a variance. If we get the variance, we will be going to the planning board for site plan review. We have already, by the way, been to the groundwater advisory, as I think you're aware. We will be going to the design review committee, to the Conservation Commission, and the earthworks for permissions. What I'd like to do now is show you some slides of the company and then of the property. So let me see if I can do this. Dave or Brad, I may need some help on this, but let me see what I can do. Hold on 1 second. That's not it.
Dave, you got this?
Let's see.
Perhaps.
All right, I think this is. All right, so let me go up to the first slide. So this is about cable matters. I'll go through. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Marshall, we can hear you, but doesn't look like we're able to see anything.
Can't see the screen.
How do we share the screen?
Well, you should have a share screen button at the bottom of your screen.
Share screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is the
Then
first.
select the screen you want to
I
share.
apologize, but let's see how I do it. So now if I shrink this down, will you be able to see it now? Yes or no? Seems like I've lost you.
That's a no.
That's a no. All right. Dave, any suggestion on how I can get this up here?
Well, again, is there a green share
I see a
screen
green
button?
button that says share screen.
So you want to click on that.
Then it, okay, and then I see desktop 1. I see Microsoft PowerPoint. Jeff, are you there? Are you perhaps more?
Yeah, let me share my screen and that will be.
Yep.
There
Yes, we got it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff. That's why I'm a lawyer and you're the technical guy. Now, Jeff, I think you're going to have to go through the slides then, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll just go through the slides fairly quickly, Jeff. Let's go to the next one. All right. So this talks about what Cable Matters does, and I've already described to you, but they do cables, adapters, docking stations, and networking products. Keep going, Jeff. This talks about, again, I've talked how they deal in tech, education, government, aerospace, medical, etc. Let's go to the next few slides that will show you their products. So the products you can see, here are some of the cables and chargers, and here are the adapters. And next you'll see the docking stations. Keep going, Jeff. And this is when the product is delivered, it comes in a box, and this is what the typical product looks like. It's sealed in very heavy vinyl bags. Those of you who might be like me, when you get something like this, they're not easy to tear open. You have to use a scissors. They're pretty thick. So that's the cable packaging. Jeff, let's go. There is the adapter, the computer adapters packaged. Go ahead, Jeff. And this is how they come. They come in these boxes, and then the front of the box is removed and they put them on the warehouse shelves. So as you can see, it's all dry product. Let's go to the next slide, Jeff. This is what their warehouse looks like. It's all dry packaging. It's in the boxes. When they need anything, they just go, they open up a box is disposed, and they send the delivery out through typically UPS for local delivery. But as I say, 99% of their deliveries goes directly from China to Amazon and never reaches Massachusetts at all. Jeff, let's show them the rest of your office. This is the kitchen that they have now, and this is going to be the type of kitchen they have in their new office building. You can see there, 6 seats. They've got a refrigerator and some cabinets and a microwave. They don't have stoves. They're not going to have garbage disposals or anything like that. Keep going, Jeff. And here's a conference room. They have several conference rooms, and they have multiple offices. And as I say, 9 to 10 people will be working at the proposed building. Okay, Jeff, now let's go and we'll show the property. So this is the actual property, and you can see there are, I don't know if you can see my mouse on it, but probably not. The area in green, thank you, Jeff. The area in green is one Lyman, and that's where there is a house and 2 barns right now. And that is at the corner. On the north, you see Bartlett Street, and directly to the west, you see Lyman Street. The blue area that's just east of the 1 Lyman is known as 0 Bartlett. And that is a piece of land that's about 17,000 square feet. And then the yellow section is 29 Lyman. That's part of our application. And that's about 2.02 acres. Currently, there is no building on either 29 or on 0 Bartlett. While we're on this slide, I just want to point a couple things out. You can see, as you're looking at it, to the right, going easterly on Bartlett Street, you can see there's an industrial building. Jeff, if you could just point these out with your mouse. Okay, that's an industrial building. Next to that is another one. And as you go down Bartlett, they are all industrial buildings. Jeff, move your mouse back a little bit, not all the way. Move it a little to the right, please, and a little more. And then go directly across Bartlett Street. Go north, Jeff. Actually, even, no, a little lower and left, lower, there. That property that's there is the subject of a petition now to the town of Northborough by Gutierrez Company. Kathy would know more about it than me, but I am told that they are planning on bringing sewer down to that point, and that they are looking to do, I'm not sure of the specifics, but I believe they're looking to do an industrial building of some sort over there. Now, Jeff, let's go back down Lyman, directly south of, no, directly south. You see on this slide that there is an industrial building there. And let me just tell you, as you go down, that property, just so that you'll know, is 35 Lyman. That is it's Lyman LLC, care of the Parsons Commercial Group. The assessment on that property is about $2,237,000. That's an industrial building. And although you don't see it on this slide, as you go down Lyman Street on the same side, the next one is 41 Lyman Street, which is Crandall. And that parcel, by the way, is about 9.5 acres. And that was just the subject in the fall and early winter of a special permit for expansion of an additional 20,000 feet to the Crandall Hicks building there. That did not go through the ZBA. That was an expansion of a non-conforming use that went to the planning board. As you were to go further down Lyman, you would come up to 55 Lyman. That's a large industrial property. That's valued at $21 million. And then again, all the way up Lyman until you get up to a residential area in Westboro. They're all industrial properties in Northborough. So I'm showing this to you so that you will understand that everything in this southeast quadrant of the intersection from Bartlett Street to Lyman Street, in the corner and inside the corner where the one Lyman is located, every one is an industrial building. This is the only residential building in that quadrant that on the easterly side of Lyman and the southerly side of Bartlett that has a residential use attached to it. Let's go to the next slide, Jeff. Okay, now, Jeff, can you enlarge this at all? Well, all right. If not, I have circled one area in red, and I hope everybody can see it. That is the very most northerly point of the groundwater area 1. I circle that because that's the property in question. To the left of that is Bartlett Street, and to the left of Bartlett, part of it is groundwater 3 and part of it is groundwater 2, directly west of our site. And south of our site is all groundwater area 1. But if you were to go north, it's groundwater area 3. And if you were to go east beyond the property immediately east of us, that's all groundwater area 3. So we are surrounded by groundwater area 1 to our south, where there's already industrial development, and to the west, north, and east, it's all groundwater area 3. Okay, I wanted you to understand where the property was, and what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Mike Sullivan, but I think Jeff will keep the slides up, and Mike can do the talking.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Jeff, do you want to bring up the existing condition plan?
Showing it now.
It's down 2 slides, Jeff. Next one.
There you go. Marshall covered part of this, but just to kind of complement what he had started, this is what the property looks like now. There are 3 parcels all told. We've got 4 acres. There's a large wetland shown in blue to the south that you can see. The topography is pretty level throughout the site. And as Marshall had indicated, there's an existing single-family house with 2 barns on the property. The house is closest to Lyman, and then the 2 barns are behind it. The proposal, as Marshall said, is to tear these down and construct a 20,000 square foot building. That's the footprint. Parking. Let's go to the next. Go to the next slide, Jeff.
Mike, before you change, can you just point out how the existing driveway on existing conditions? Jeff, can you go back 1 slide, please? How it goes right from Lyman right through to Bartlett, or vice versa, however you want to call it.
Well, I think you just did that pretty well, Marshall.
Okay.
Let's go to the proposed plan, Jeff. Okay, again, just for orientation purposes, Bartlett Street is to the north, Lyman Street is to the west, and the large wetland, just again for orientation, is the large blue area to the rear. The parking that is proposed, we show 45 spaces coming both, there's 24 feet wide coming in from both Bartlett and Lyman. The spaces were arrived at using the town bylaw. They have a minimum and a maximum. The minimum is 32, the maximum is 47. And as I had indicated, we're proposing 45. The drainage is going to be handled in two different ways. The roof drainage, which is relatively clean water, is going to be discharged directly into two subsurface infiltration systems to the east and the west of the building. The rectangles that are shown in blue. The parking lot is, because the water is not as clean as the roof, it's going to have multiple treatments, starting off with deep sump catch basins that will collect the sediment. From the deep sump catch basins, it's going to go into a water quality structure, and that would collect additional sediment. And it is also be equipped with an oil gas separator so that we don't have to worry if there's a drop of oil or something on the pavement, it will be contained within that water quality structure. From the water quality structure, it will then go into a forebay of the infiltration basin, again, eliminating more of the sediment and ultimately discharging into the infiltration basin that is shown as kind of a blue rectangle along Lyman Street. The septic system is proposed in the front of the building along Bartlett. The reason we chose that area is to maximize the separation to the wetland. The soils there are very good, and the septic system will be designed 5 feet above groundwater, providing additional protection to the groundwater. The proposed use is minimal flow. You have a small office area and warehouse. So the hydraulic loading associated with this facility is similar to a single family house. Now, Marshall had mentioned the project across the street. I don't think anybody knows the timing on when they're going to bring sewer down. Obviously, if sewer is available, this facility would tie into it as well. But we're assuming it's not, so we're presenting tonight with a septic system. The open space requirement in this area is 25%. We are proposing 58%, and we can only use half of the wetland area as part of that calculation. So that's 58%, including half of the blue area, if you will. The lot coverage, by definition, is essentially the building. And in this area, in industrial zone, 50% is allowed, and we're about 11%. So all the aspects of this that could potentially impact the groundwater, the septic system would maximize the distance to the wetland. We're way above the groundwater. The drainage system, multiple treatments as it's going through the process before it is infiltrated into the ground, providing a high quality of water going into the groundwater. The fact that the building is 10%, 11% what is allowed on the site, and the open space is more than double what is required. I think all of those things combined provide a situation that we satisfy the intent of the bylaw, at least in my opinion. With that, Mr. Chairman, Marshall, back to you.
Okay. Unless there are any immediate questions, I will go on to the petition and why I believe we're entitled to a variance. I'll leave that up to the chair.
Yeah. Mr. Gould, please proceed.
All right, very good. So I just want to point out to everybody, our application included the 3 parcels, map 66, parcel 9, 10, and 11, that were the 3 parcels that I showed you on that first plan that you saw, that was the assessor's plan with the green, the yellow, and the blue right there. And with all of those being included, 2 of them right now are vacant. And the 2 that are vacant are approximately 2.5 acres. And the other parcel is the one that has a house and a couple of barns on it. That is about 1.7 acres. The overall property is over 4 acres, on which we're looking to do a 20,000 square foot footprint, along with the parking that Mike talked about. There is both a minimum and a maximum, and we didn't do the minimum parking. We certainly didn't do the maximum. And we figured, although we're not going to need all those parking spaces, it will give us plenty of extra room for snow removal and snow storage if we have an unusually tough winter. So one of the things that we have, or the primary thing we have to show in order to get a variance, is we need to go over the situation of why we're entitled to a variance, and we have to provide certain information. We have to say, what are the soil conditions, shape, or topography of the lot or structure that affect the lot as distinguished from other lots in the zoning district in which we are located. By definition, in the Aquifer Protection Bylaw, which is section 7, chapter 7-07, I'm not a scientist or an engineer by any means, but I was on the planning board and I was a member of the committee that came up with both the first attempt at an aquifer protection bylaw that did not pass. And then I was still on the committee when I was on the planning board, and I was chairman at that time. And we finally got this bylaw passed. And we worked with a couple of local people, Mike Beck and Wally Malika, those of you who may remember them. They were the prime movers, but there were a lot of hearings about this, and they did not want to scare property owners. And so what they did was they said, the primary reason we are doing this is to protect our wells. Back in the early and mid 80s, when this was planned and brought to town meetings, the primary source of water for the town were the 3 wells that we had at the time. Right now, none of those wells are used, but the bylaw did anticipate that. And it said it's not only protect, preserve, and maintain the existing, but also the potential groundwater supply. So, excuse me, obviously the bylaw doesn't go away just because we are not currently using those wells. The wells are very important and we are not trying to injure those as well. The hardship, the soil conditions, the way it reads here, and forgive me if I pronounce any of this wrong, there are geologic formations on or under the surface that are part of a geologic formation that contains saturated permeable material to yield significant quantities of water to wells and springs. It also talks about areas of influence to provide drawdowns by a pumping well at a town well, as plotted on a 2-dimensional map surface. Now, some of this was done, but very little with actual digging or borings. Most of this was done with the then DPW and the water department, sewer and water department, and with the engineering firm. IEP is the engineering firm that did this bylaw. And what they determined is what area would most go into the wells, so that as the wells were being drawn down by usage, where would the water come from to replace the water in the wells? And the area that was called Area 1 was the greatest area of influence. And this is on, as you saw in that slide I showed you earlier, the property at 1 Lyman is the most northerly tip of this area of influence. As I've already pointed out to you, the wells that were well south of this area, no pun intended when I say well south, They are not being used currently, but we still want to abide by the purpose and intent of the bylaw. It's important to note that the underlying district of everything on Lyman Street and Bartlett Street and in between where they come together. So what I've been referring to as the southeast quadrant, all of that is zoned industrial. Right now, all the way up Bartlett Street is one of the most newly developed areas of industry. And those are typically in area 3 or perhaps not at all. Based on the map I see, it looks like they're all in area 3 except for the areas that are in white. And I think those are not under the aquifer protection bylaw. But I do want you to understand that this is the only industrially zoned property that is unable to be used for industrial purposes because there was a house there. Now, the house and the barn and the barns are allowed, residences are allowed, the barns are allowed, but some of the uses that are allowed, for example, agriculture is allowed, and you can have pesticides and fertilizers, but there can't be any outdoor storage. So in a residence, particularly with 2 barns, there's a much greater likelihood of potential damage to the groundwater than the type of building that we are talking about that's going to be a newly constructed building, sprinklered, with absolutely no combustible materials and nothing more than what might be in that small kitchen to clean the kitchen sink, probably less than what you would have in a typical home where they're going to be fertilizing their lawns and mowing their lawns, and they're going to have equipment that's got oil and gas. At this property, there's going to be no overnight parking of vehicles. This is a business type of warehouse, 6,000 square feet. They typically operate from start of business in the morning till 6 o'clock when they close down. The warehouse only operates during those hours. This is not a 24/7 operation. They are not open on Saturday and Sunday. It is not going to be a detriment to the neighbors because we've intentionally put all the parking on the opposite side from where the residential neighbor is over on Bartlett Street. So they would not see that. There is an area for loading docks, but the loading dock will be used, as I say, perhaps 1 time a month. Currently, it's 1 time every 2 months, but it will not be used more often than that. We are also working with Dave Veron, who's a town resident, and he's on the design review committee. He's a landscaper, and he is designing a landscape plan that's going to buffer the property from the residential property at 152 Bartlett Street. And he's going to put some nice landscape plantings in front along Bartlett Street. And I think I may have said the residential neighbor across Bartlett. I meant to cross Lyman.
Lyman.
So what I want everybody to know is this is going to be a very nice looking building. It's not going to look like an old office or warehouse. It's going to have a lot of glass on it in the front so that the offices will have exposure. And then the warehouse is going to be where it faces the 152 Bartlett Street property, because I know they wrote a letter of opposition. There will not be windows in the warehouse on that side, and there will not be any lights in the building on that side, and there won't be lights on the grass or in the landscaped areas on that side. So it's just going to be normal traffic for the 9 employees that are going to be in the building and potentially 1 new employee. And during the day, there might be, as we said, on the super busy days, there might be potentially 3 or 4 trucks a day. Most of the time, it's no more than 2 trucks a day. And those are typically UPS trucks picking up and delivering, or it might be either FedEx or it might be Amazon delivering something to them if they've ordered office supplies or anything because they don't sell office supplies. So with respect to the variance, the soil conditions are what create the hardship on this lot. And the soil conditions are unique to this parcel because it's the only parcel in this entire industrial quadrant at the corner of Bartlett and Lyman that does not yet have an industrial building on it, and that has as much unused, 2 lots that are unused there that we intend to incorporate at 1 Lyman Street. So that is very unique in this zone, both in the industrial zone here, it's unique, and in the aquifer zone, because unless somebody goes to expand, as was recently done at 41 Lyman in the fall before the planning board, and they got unanimous approval. And that was with a company that has, I believe they have thousands of gallons of fuel that are there in their snow blowers and in their lawn mowers. And they are also going to have, I believe, over 35 trucks that are there, and they'd be parked there all night long. We are not going to be like that. This is going to look like an office setting. It's just going to have a big enough building that it will have a warehouse, but it's not your typical warehouse where there's a lot of activity and commotion and a lot of trailer trucks coming in and out. So that's how we differ, and that's how our soil conditions and the underground topography of how the cone of influence affects the property, that's what makes us unique. Now, what is the hardship caused by those factors? The hardship is that although we're in an industrial zone, we, without a variance, will only be able to keep using it for what it is or some similar use. And the purpose of the groundwater protection bylaw, and I know this for a fact, having been on that committee and having worked with it many times over the course of the last 35 years, it was not intended to be a restriction against using property. I know some people have questioned, well, how can you grant a variance if it's not a permitted use? Because there is a sentence in the bylaw that says if the use is not described, then it's not permitted. We all know, both on the zoning board and in both the planner, the engineer, and the building inspector know that in the history of our town, in the last 35 years since we've had the bylaw, the intent was that it's not an absolute restriction. Rather, it says you can't do it. So if you want to do something, you have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I think we have a letter from Mr. Litchfield saying that it's consistently been interpreted that way throughout the 35 years. And so we're able to do that. And the hardship that would prevent us from doing that is why we are coming and asking the zoning board to allow us to do what we are proposing. And if we can't do that, that's clearly a hardship. Now, what facts will support a finding that the relief sought will not constitute substantial detriment to the public good? The public good is dictated by the Aquifer Protection Bylaw. I think we have given you the information. We gave the same information to the Groundwater Advisory Committee, and all but one, a member of the planning board who was on there and who has written a letter opposing, all agreed that it should be allowed with reasonable conditions that Mr. Litchfield put forth in a letter. But there is less danger to the water and the aquifer from the building that's going to be here than there will be from a home. Our water usage is going to be less. It's only going to be used from 9 to 6, 5 days a week. We are going to be using the DEP water usage shows that we're going to be using approximately the same as a 4 to 5 bedroom home. And there will not be a barn where somebody can work on their car or work on their lawnmowers or snow blowers or tractors or anything else. This is a very clean building. And the nice thing is that the zoning board can attach conditions to this that with the residents, you are not able to do. The fourth factor is what facts will support a finding that the relief sought may be given without nullifying or substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the bylaw. And I think I've explained it, but again, this is going to be a clean warehouse. It's 6,000 feet of office, 17,000 feet of absolutely dry and clean excuse me, warehouse, as you saw from the pictures. Very little truck traffic, much less truck traffic than any warehouse that I know. As a matter of fact, in driving up and down Bartlett and up and down Lyman Street and looking at some of the decisions, this is going to be by far the least invasive industrial use of any of the buildings on Lyman or on Bartlett Street. This is as close as you're going to come to a house with a big garage with somebody storing a lot of clean products in their garage. And there won't be any use at night or on weekends. So I think it's actually going to be an excellent buffer between the more intensive industrial users and the residents across the street at 152 Bartlett Street. I think it makes for a very pleasant transition from active industrial to, I wouldn't even call this light industrial. Light industrial typically refers to manufacturing or something like that. This is really just clean storage and 6,000 feet of office, relatively small. So I think that satisfies the reasons for the variance. The last point I want to make, having been involved with the groundwater committee when the bylaw came to pass, and I did send a note about this to both Fred, Kathy, and Bob. When the bylaw was passed, they had lots of public hearings, and the first time it was brought to town meeting, it did not pass because a lot of people were saying, well, you're going to stop us from using our property. And although the response was, the goal is not to stop you from using your property, a lot of people didn't believe it. So they withdrew the application and they said, we're going to go out and we're going to have public hearings with people and we're going to invite them to attend and ask any questions. They invited brokers, major property owners, and they invited some lawyers to come to the meeting and plenty of engineers. And the question was often asked, well, what if we have a use that's not at all injurious? And they said, this is not an absolute bar to any other use. It just means you have to go to first a groundwater advisory committee and then to a zoning board of appeals to get a variance. And that's why we are here today. It was not intended to be used to weaponize zoning. And the fact that we are in a groundwater area 1 with this clean proposal coming in and without us using the wells right now at all, so there's really nothing being drawn from this property into the well. Whoop, my light just went off. Let me put that back on. So the purpose here is that we should understand that the bylaw is there for a purpose, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's understand what the goal is. And at the very beginning, it says the purpose is to protect, preserve, and maintain existing and potential groundwater supply, recharge areas within known aquifers. I'm not an engineer, but I think Mr. Litchfield, who was there at the advisory committee, and Mr. Sullivan, who's here tonight, we have asked, this is in no way a danger to the aquifer or to the area. So to say, well, as a result, we're never going to let you use it for an industrial use, that's not what the bylaw was intended for. And lastly, I just want to say, we're in the middle of a COVID crisis, and we keep hearing the experts say, go with the science, go with the data. And I'm saying to you, we have just presented you data and science that this proposed use cannot contaminate the wells. It is not going to excuse me, create any problems with the groundwater. So let's not penalize an individual because the characteristics of his property are unique and that they have these geologic formations and terrific soils that allow the property to quickly drain down through the soil. I hope that the board will listen, and I hope that the board will understand it's a unique parcel, and by not granting the variance, it is creating an enormous hardship. And the bylaw can be respected, but it's not a weapon, and let's treat it as such. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gould. I appreciate the presentation, very helpful, very informative. Wanted to open up any questions or comments from the board, obviously before we open up to staff and any attendees. Any questions?
Can you confirm the current size of the house and the barn?
I do not know. I don't know. I believe one of the brokers may be on the call. I don't know if he has the information. We do have a picture of it. It's not a big house.
Let me just scale it off, Marshall. And get,
Okay.
A rough approximation is fine.
The larger barn is 50 by 40. So the footprint of that barn is 2,000. The smaller barn is 20, call it 20 by 30, 600. And the house, 50. Yeah, it's probably got a footprint of about 1,500. If the question is the impervious surface, is that where you were going with that? Because I do have that number.
That was the next question. Yeah. I guess what I'm asking is,
the existing impervious is 7,700. The proposed impervious is 45,000.
so we're going from an impervious surface of 7,700 to an impervious surface of 45,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
The only thing I would add to that is with the impervious that we're providing, it's being treated before discharging into the ground. So I would suggest that what this is going to provide is a higher quality water going into the aquifer, where there's nothing there now. And the septic system is probably in the groundwater that's currently there.
Brad?
Yes.
Through you to Attorney Gould, does the landowner have that business of selling the equipment and vehicles and things in the field where it says one lineman on that strip on this present map?
Answering as Marshall answering, I don't know. I believe that somebody lives there. I don't know if Mr. Gao is on the call, but I don't know what they are doing inside the building now.
Actually, I'm wondering about behind the barn and in the field. They're frequently on Lyman Street is one or more vehicles for sale by owner, I'm assuming.
I have heard that, but I don't know who's doing it.
Okay, thank you.
If it is on our property, that would not take place if Mr. Jiang buys this property and develops it as we're proposing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Does this proposed building meet all the setbacks?
Yes, we are not asking any dimensional variances at all.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Fran.
Two questions. One, I applaud the idea of expanding business, but I'm curious as to if in Southborough you're at about 8,000 square feet and you're looking now to expand that to about 20,000 square feet. How much of that is need now and need or growth for the future? And then my second part of that same question is, you hear a lot about the truck traffic is going to be minimal, UPS style, the same type of vehicles that come into my neighborhood. Yet there's a 35-foot loading dock with a visual, a picture of two what look like 18-wheelers. So what would be the reason for that if there's not that kind of truck movement?
We asked the same question, and Mike, I don't know if you want to answer it or Jeff, but what I was told is that when you build a 20,000 square foot industrial building, it's funny because for retail and commercial, it states how many square feet you need per loading dock. In industrial, it says reasonable. It doesn't state how many. So we sort of took the commercial, the retail and commercial and said, okay, what would it be? And we just took that size.
And the first part of the question, which was, are we building for future growth or are you already busting at the seams?
Let me answer this question, Marshall.
Sure.
So, Fred, yeah, we are almost used up all the warehouse space. As a matter of fact, we rented the neighbor's warehouse space temporarily now. So we do have immediate need for enlarge the warehouse space. So yes, we build this for future expansion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
It's more for Fred. It's just a general question about groundwater zones 1, 2, and 3. Can you just refresh us on what are the differences between 1, 2, and 3, and just from like a general sense, I guess?
Sure, Mr. Chair. The Groundwater Advisory Board reviews projects that are within the groundwater areas. There are 3 areas. Zone 1 is the most restrictive as it's the closest to the wells and has the closest influence to the wells. Zone 2 and Zone 3 go further on out. The Zone 2 is the immediate influence on the well from the drawdown, and then Zone 1 is, and then Zone 2 is the area where the groundwater contributes to that initial zone of influence. And then our groundwater 3 is really the surface waters that might contribute to Zone 2 and then on into Zone 1. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. I guess just for simplicity's sake, groundwater zone 1 is the most impactful on wells, and then 2 and 3, almost like a ranking of sorts.
Yes, the groundwater, the wells are all located within the groundwater 1 areas.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, Fred, Mr. Litchfield, where is the well located compared to where this property is?
The well, the zone that this Zone 1 is centered around or approximately closest to is the well on Lyman Street near the Bartlett Pond boat ramp. There's a well, there's a brick building there just beyond as you head towards Westboro away from Bartlett Street. I'm not quite sure the number, but it's, I think it's before 55 Lyman, but not much closer to Bartlett Street than 55 Lyman. I think it's across the street from what used to be, I believe people refer to as the old town paint building.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It's, I'm looking at a map. It's actually across the street from Crandall Hicks. It's that brick building that's right on Lyman on the far side, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm kind of drawing a blank, but now it makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Oh, sorry, Fred, you gonna say something? Fred, you were muted.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I believe the Crandall Hicks building is number 41 Lyman, just for a point of reference.
Okay. Thank you.
And then just Mr. Chair, just one question, follow up
Yes.
on Fran's question about the loading bays. So there's currently a plan for 45 parking spaces, or
That's correct.
is that do those spaces need to be there because of the size of the building, or is it? I guess why are there so many?
As I said, this is Mike Sullivan speaking. As a minimum, it's 32, and as a max, is 47. And as we were laying out the parking, there was usable parking space that we just put the 45 in there. So if that's objectionable to the board, we can certainly adjust that.
Just want to confirm. Thank you.
The minimum, if I could, the minimum required is 32, and the maximum required, we went over this with the building inspector, was, I believe,
47.
47. So we're putting that in, but it could easily be reduced because Mr. Jang says he doesn't even need the 32, but it's what the zoning bylaw calls for. And we figured that would give us areas. By the way, the entrance to this building for people who are going to be either entering the warehouse, not by a loading dock, not by a tractor trailer truck. So virtually everybody's going to be entering from Bartlett Street, from the front of the building. There's a nice entry, the same entry as they enter the office. And so most of the parking will be on the easterly side of this property that will be blocked out from the property at 152 Bartlett. We did put more parking in the rear on the south side of the property. And it's anticipated that they just put the paving in, but it'll probably be used to just push snow back there. So we could easily do without a lot of that parking.
Mr. Chair, then if I could follow up on Paul's follow-up to mine,
Yep.
and I might have missed it, I apologize, because it's really surreal sometimes working from home like this. How many current employees and how many are you expecting with almost tripling your size?
We are a 9-employee company. We expect to grow like 1 employee every year. So we'll look to get to like a 15 in 5 years, 20 in 10 years. So that's the projection for the growth of the company size.
Okay, so 45 parking spaces, well over what you anticipate needing for at least the next 10 years.
That's correct. As
Okay.
I mentioned, Mike suggests if the board decide we need to reduce the number of parking sites, we'll be happy to reduce that the number.
Thank you.
One of the things that we would be doing is asking the planning board, if we go to site plan review, to build less spaces and just have them as reserve if ever needed.
Gotcha. Okay.
And those reserves would be non-paved at least initially?
Well, it makes sense to pave it because it will contribute to the drainage, runoff, and treatment to help direct it all to one area, as opposed to if it's ever needed, then having to redo all of the drainage at the site.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board at this point? All right, any questions or comments from staff? Fred, Bob, Kathy? I mean, Kathy, we've received some letters, so if you just want to just reiterate that, the fact we've seen those.
Sure. As far as staff letters, you have 2 letters from Fred Litchfield. Actually, I'm sorry, 1 letter from Fred Litchfield. which is that he can review based on the Groundwater Advisory Committee's meeting. And then as far as other correspondence, you have received, let me just, there is correspondence from, it's a letter that 4 different people sent. It originated, I believe, from the Stones, who live at 152 Bartlett Street. And I believe that they are not, and actually I haven't checked the attendees, but I believe that they were not available for tonight's meeting, which is why they sent the letter in. So you have the original letter from Michael Stone and Laurel Stone, and then there's 3 other copies of that letter that other residents sent in. And then those came in May. And then today and yesterday, we received letters from Amy Paretsky and Carrie Martinek, and those, those were sent to you earlier today.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know if you would just want to have Fred review his letter.
Yeah,
Brad?
if you don't mind. Yeah, that'd be great. Fred, if you don't mind, just going over your groundwater letter to the board, please.
Nope, I don't mind at all. I'm happy to. The although it was a while ago,
Yeah, it was.
the Groundwater Advisory Committee
Right.
did meet on March 10th to review the application for a variance. We didn't really review the site plan. There was the plan that's been presented tonight was part of the package, but we didn't review any of the details of the site plan. We did talk about the use. They did vote in favor to recommend approval, provided that the building, any decision approving the variance would require them not to have any storage of any toxic or hazardous materials on site beyond that of a normal single-family home, something that they offered. It also, we discussed it, that if the application for variance was approved, that the applicant would adhere to all the requirements of section 707.01.D3B5, which is conditions about impervious cover, septic loading, and recharge of the drainage system. And they also recommended, there was a discussion, as Attorney Gould had indicated, there was a discussion about a project across the street at what's being referred to as Parcel H of the Gutierrez Company. It's a very large warehouse, I think almost 160,000 square feet about. They're proposing a force main sewer that will run up Bartlett Street and tie into the town's sewer up the road a little bit. And the belief is that if this project were to happen after that project, then there'd be the ability for them to tie into sewer and then not have to build that septic system as outlined on the plan. And the applicant at the time seemed agreeable, and it is recommended that they consider making that application, provided it is available. Not that they would be required to run the sewer the entire distance to the gravity line, but to tie into the force main if available.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Fred. All right, before I open it up to the public, any final questions or comments? Okay, not hearing none. We're going to open it up. I see Carrie Martinek has had her hand up for a while. So Ms. Martinek, would you please state your name and address for the record and give your comments or questions?
Sure. Carrie Martinek, 16 Hemlock Drive. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just really quickly, I know I sent a lengthy letter today. I hope everyone had a chance to read it. Thanks for taking the time to do so. I just wanted to quickly point out a couple of things. I heard a lot of information given about how it's a great project and it'll have nice windows and it'll do this and that. But when it comes to a variance, it's not really about any of that. It's not about the aqueduct protection bylaw or groundwater one or what happened years ago or any of that. It's very cut and dry. And I think I included in my letter, the one thing that the Supreme Judicial Court has noted is, first of all, variances are to be granted sparingly. And secondly, unless circumstances relating to the soil conditions of the land, the shape of the land, or the topography of the land cause the hardship, no variance may be granted lawfully. So when it comes down to it, I heard a very long story about different components, but none that really presented, there was really no science or data that pointed to, well, what is the condition of the soil? I did hear Mr. Sullivan say, a quote, soils there are very good. So we know that's not the soil. I don't know, the shape of the land doesn't look, when you look at the site plan, the shape of the land doesn't look, in a matter that would cause a hardship. And I don't know what the topography story was, but I still don't see any facts or data. I just heard a very long story that presented no specific data. I'll be really curious to see how you guys translate that into a decision, because part of the responsibility in writing the decision is to include findings based on specific analysis, which I personally did not hear. The last thing I just want to point out, just a minor point, 301 is groundwater 3, not 1. There's a small piece of it that's groundwater 1 that they still need a special permit for, but the 301 property is a different zone. Lastly, just to conclude, I know you're probably short on time. I'm not against, building in the industrial zone, but I think if we do want to build these kinds of things, what we should do, the right course of action, is we should get together and talk about changing the bylaw. Because if it's not working, and if it isn't a point where groundwater 1 as written doesn't make sense, let's take a look at that bylaw and change that so that we don't have a far-fetched variance come before the boards and then have to deal with that and put people through a lot of money and probably aggravation, quite frankly. So anyway, thanks for taking my comments and reading my letter.
Thank you, Ms. Martnick.
Okay.
And another hand up from Ms. Paretsky, Ms. Amy Paretsky. Would you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
Sure, Amy Paretsky, 47 Indian Meadow Drive. And I can turn on a picture if you want. Came up blank. Let's see. Well, I guess if you don't mind it blank, I'll leave it blank because it doesn't, I figured out how to unmute it, but it won't let me change the picture. So
yeah, I can't figure it out.
I did it the other day and it came up, but maybe because I have my screen small, so my letter's in front of me.
I think Jeff has to unshare his before you can share yours.
Either way, if you can hear me, I'll just keep talking.
Okay.
So I don't know if everybody had a chance to read my letter. My letter pertained more to groundwater, and I could read the whole thing if anyone didn't have time, but if everybody had time to read it, then I'll just touch on some of the points. I was, as they stated, the one person on groundwater committee that did vote no. And what I learned from being on the groundwater committee in the past year is that they look at the protections, they look at the systems, the protections, the chemicals, but they don't look at the zoning. And in my letter, what I'm talking about for zoning is, I'm trying to get it straight because I was trying to figure out the picture. But this is on groundwater 1, which is the biggest protection and it's closest to the wells. And when you do read through the zoning bylaws, it does say if it's not permitted, then it's prohibited. And the zoning bylaws also have a special section for special permits. And Mr. Gould did say that they didn't want it to be a weapon, but when they wrote it originally, if they didn't want it to be a weapon in industrial, they would have left it open to warehouses, at least in the special permit section. The groundwater 1 is very specific. That is for a single family residential or agricultural. It doesn't include warehouses anywhere, whether it's permitted or whether it's permitted by special permit, it's definitely left out. And so if way back when they didn't want it to be a weapon, they would have allowed warehouses somewhere in the zoning bylaws. And they are allowed on groundwater 3. Like Kerry mentioned, the newer warehouses that are being built now are on groundwater 3. So in my letter, I mentioned when Mr. Gould was pointing out the 2 warehouses beside One Lyman, those were built before 1986. Those were built before the groundwater bylaws were in place. So that's the difference. This one Lyman Street wasn't built before the groundwater bylaws were in place. The bylaws are also a protective overlay. And let's see. I think that's really what I wanted to get into is the groundwater bylaws definitely left out warehouses. And Mr. Gould got into the story on how they didn't want it to be a weapon, but if they really wanted it there, they would have included it.
Sure. Okay.
That's all. If you read my letter, I guess you can get my point.
All right. Yep.
All right, thanks.
I did. But thank you, Ms. Paretsky. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is Crandall Hicks at 41, is that in groundwater overlay District 1? If I can ask staff?
Yes, Steph, Fred, or Bob.
I would say it is, yes.
Okay.
This is Mike Sullivan.
Oh, that's Mike Sullivan.
Yeah.
Do we have a response from staff?
Staff? Bob or Fred?
Fred?
Yeah, we're working on it.
Oh, okay.
I believe that Mike is correct. It is 1. Kathy's just confirmed that for me. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gould.
Decision from the planning board that was dated November, and on page 2, it specifically states that it is within area 1 of the groundwater protection. And this was to add 20,000 square feet. And it also mentioned in this one, in this planning board approval by a 5-0 vote, among the things that it talked about was how many machines are going to be there, 1,281 gallons of engine oil, 6,700 snow throwers, 1,000 lawn mowers. Those were in the findings on page 3. And that was approved unanimously by the planning board. Now, I understand that, every property is a little bit different, but I mean, we won't have any of that information. So I just want to make the board aware of that.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have another question from the audience. Brett O'Brien. Would you mind just stating your name and address again for the record?
Yes.
Before you give your comment.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So I live at 111 Brigham Street, which is right around the corner from here. And I guess one of the questions I have, which maybe one of the people who already spoke could speak to a little bit is, what's really going on here in terms of the objection to the project? I mean, from a groundwater protection standpoint, it's clearly not a risk. So is it sort of a legalistic desire to just stop any sort of development? And if that's the case, there's certainly people in every town that have that mentality. But from a common sense, looking at this, you say, this is surrounded by other industrial properties. It's zoned industrial. Other properties around this are operating as industrial uses here. The purpose of zoning is to keep industrial and residential separate. Why do we want this house as an island in the industrial zone? I mean, this is a positive thing for the town. The tax base goes from 11,000 to 35,000, approximately estimated, if this project goes ahead, which is about $250,000 over the next 10 years. That assuming the values don't keep going up and the tax base doesn't increase. So on on a conservative estimate, it's $250,000 for the town over the next 10 years. It's a nice new building, you know, on the gateway to Northborough here as you come in. You know, clearly the house and the barn there are atrocious. You know, this is a positive thing, both from a, you know, aesthetic, visible standpoint, from a common sense zoning standpoint, from a risk to the groundwater. We don't have that. So I guess my question is to those that already spoke, you know, what is the real reason for, besides a legalistic approach to, you know, reading the zoning bylaws? Why are we, you know, why try to stop this project that is so good for the town and good for the tax base, good for, I just don't see the downside here, but maybe I'm missing something.
Okay, well, good point. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I appreciate the comments. Do we have any other questions or comments from the audience? Any other final responses or questions, first from the board or staff?
I'll make a motion to close.
Yeah, that was my
the
6-year-old. Okay, thanks. All right, hearing nothing else. We had a motion to close the hearing.
I'll
Seconded.
second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Aye.
Let's see. Paul says aye. Was it Mark, you seconded the motion?
Aye.
Fran says aye.
Fran says
Yes.
aye. Dick?
I recuse myself.
Oh, that's right. You're out. Sorry,
Jeff said aye.
Jeff,
Leslie
and
says
you
aye.
made the motion. Leslie, okay. I'm in favor as well. Okay, the hearing is now closed. Thank you.
Thank
We will
you.
make the decision later this evening. All right. Let's see. Got my clipboard here. I think that's all we have for petitions tonight, Kathy, unless I'm missing something. Just some old new business and things like that. But that's the last one for tonight.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I feel like I'm rusty here.
Well, you've got I mean you closed three hearings tonight.
Three.
And one was continued and one asked to be continued.
Yep.
So it wasn't heard. I mean, it's almost 9:30, Brad. I mean, it's not, you know, Cinderella here, but the reason why we have as staff and as the Zoom committee here in the town hall is asking about the 9:30 to be respected is because for the IT department, there's about an hour's worth of work after that has to be done after the meeting. It can't wait until tomorrow. So that's why we are just asking all the boards to respect that 9:30 timeframe.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, certainly might be able to knock a couple of these off. But just to be aware that it's a little after 25 after.
So point of clarification, Mr. Chair, if we had to continue for discussion and voting purposes, does it have to wait till next meeting in July, or can we schedule something in between that would just be open meeting to discuss and vote on?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
That was my question too.
Yes, you could do that. And given that the public hearing portions have been closed, we can schedule the meeting. I mean, the public can still view online, but there isn't the ability for the
Right.
public, to participate. So we have more leeway to schedule those as opposed to tonight's kind of meeting with public hearings. We only have one license. So we're very restricted because every board has to use that license. So, so yes, the short
Guys,
answer, which I can never give,
Is it-
is you could schedule another meeting this month if you wanted to.
Please keep in mind also the 9:30 is a suggestion. It's not a hard stop. So obviously feel free, you're welcome to continue on as you need to.
So David, would it be okay if we continue to 10 o'clock? And just,
Absolutely. Just, yeah, don't worry about
is
the
that all
time.
right?
Just, yeah, conduct your business. It's all good.
Is that okay with everybody else?
Yep. Yeah, I think it would
I
be
mean,
great to get it
some
done.
nights we've had some marathon meetings that I know we're all different world now, but
Let's try to
I'm okay because everything's still fresh in our minds, and I don't want to say we can just knock these out because I want to give each petition its due diligence, but I
Please
think
I
there's
appreciate it. If the staff's willing to stay, I think it'd be great to get it done.
yeah.
Let's go, Brad. Do it.
All righty,
Yeah,
let's do it.
Thank you for your willingness to do it.
All right, first one, the 121 Hudson Street, the above ground pool. The main abutter, they're all family. No objections, but I'm gonna open up to the board for questions and comments before I give it my blessing, I guess.
I have no issues with granting a variance for the setback.
Yeah, I would agree with Fran. Obviously, there's no detriment to the public good. The pool has been up since the mid-90s. It's only because of what you would, an A&R splitting of a lot that this is even an issue that has existed for several years now. So I don't see how, the hardship is that they would have to take down the pool, which I think is substantial. And then, the lot structure is an odd shape. If you actually look at it, it doesn't look like it's a normal shaped lot due to the A&R. So I have no issue.
I as well have no issue with it. It seems like a easy mistake to have made, and it seems like it's an above ground pool. It can be taken down at any time if they need to get to the backyard. They can take down that pool and move it. So I'm in agreement too.
I would agree as well.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. All the props in the world that they are coming forward and just making sure everything's cleared up as far as the paperwork. So, no objections, no questions, comments.
Kathy, can we make variances subject to the same property owner? So if, let's say hypothetically, if we approve this variance, we could put a condition that says it's only for the current owner, so that if he decides to sell it, that they would have to take it down, let's say?
I don't think we can.
Not with variances, I don't think.
It's only
right?
special permits?
Yeah, special permits, you can, we had talked to town council, a couple of years ago. So special permits, you can make specific, but this variance, the language, if I'm anticipating what your decision is going to be, the language is very specific to, this pool and this property line.
Okay.
So if they sell the house and someone moves in, they're not going to have to move the pool.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Any other final questions or comments? Hearing none. Does anyone would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll take a crack. So I make a motion to approve the petition of Scott Dene for a variance special permit to allow a replacement above ground pool to be located less than the required 15 feet from a side yard setback. The pool is installed, but the property was split via approval not required plan afterwards. The subject property is located at 121 Hudson Street, map 46, parcel 1 in the residential C district and groundwater protection overlay district 2, district area 2.
Second,
Oh, well, before, I think we just need to amend it to specifically how far into the setback? We always have trouble with the language. Is it within 11, inside 11 feet, or is it 4 feet from the property line?
Yeah. Mark,
I
you're always good
remember
at
that-
this.
yeah.
You're always good at talking about this.
Mark's specialty.
Yeah, it is.
Except I wasn't here for the hearing, so.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so
I think
I
that,
think,
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, I think he's looking for 11 feet of setback, right? Because if it's 15 and he's 4 feet away from the property line,
11. Yeah.
11, he needs 11 feet, right, Kathy?
Right. So you're allowing the pool to be within the setback. And also too, it's the vote wouldn't be that that it's a variance or special permit. It would be that it's the variance.
Just a variance, okay. Sorry.
What you would be granting is 11 feet of relief.
Yeah.
Grant them 12 feet of relief. Just, we always fudge.
Yeah.
Exactly. I knew it. It's like, this is Mark's specialty. Like, oh, it's gonna be 11 feet 3 inches. You know, who knows? Yeah. Okay.
Well, with that modification, I'll second Paul's motion.
And so it's so this is a 4-person vote. All those in favor?
Roll call, Fran, aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Paul, Dick.
Dick, aye.
Then I'm number 4. All right. Unanimous vote.
You know what? We were just discussing this while we were muted as staff. So I'm sorry, we missed who did the second.
I seconded Paul.
And Paul made the motion. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
And
you.
then it was Dick and myself. Mark came in late, so it's a 4-person vote.
Right. So is the 4 in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the next one, so yeah, Barefoot Road, we continued to July at 6 p.m. And the next one is the 82 Coolidge Circle. So essentially they're asking for the 24 square feet of relief, the accessory dwelling or the in-laws. Or the
I
mother-in-law.
have no problem with this.
Right.
Nope.
I would have no problem.
I have no problem with it either.
I agree. I have no problem.
And I think it's a reasonable request.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Okay. Any other questions or comments from staff? You guys didn't seem to have any. Yeah, Bob?
Just remember, it's a variance and a special permit, and special permit with site plan approval.
Gotcha.
Because it's a variance for the size of the accessory dwelling unit, and then a special permit site plan approval for the permission to have the ADU in that zoning district.
Okay. This sounds like a Mark.
Okay,
There we go.
move that we grant a variance for the property at 82 Coolidge Circle for an additional 30 square feet of construction over the allowed 700 square feet. And I also move that we grant a special permit for an additional dwelling unit on the property at 82 Coolidge Circle. And now, do I have to also mention the special permit with site plan review?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Special permit site plan approval.
Yes. Site plan approval.
Yes. Yep. Affirmative. Do we have a second?
Second,
All right. Dick seconded. All those in favor?
Fran, aye.
Paul, aye.
Mark, aye.
Dick, aye.
Brad, aye. All right. Let's see. 329 punted for next month. 1 Lyman Street. So that's Dick recused himself. Jeff, you're on deck for this one. Let's hear the questions and the comments about this property.
If I may,
Sure.
I tend to agree with Marshall's summary that this is a construction that will have minimal impact on the water quality of the area, since it's pretty much going to be dry storage on a slab. This is an industrial property. It's been an industrial property. I actually will miss the scenic home that's on the corner there, but you know, it has been zoned industrial. And they are coming in with a otherwise complying industrial property for it. So I tend to say that they should be allowed.
I'd like to follow up with Mark and agree. And we've seen several proposals over the last several years, much more dense use, much more coverage, as well as bigger trucks coming in and out. This is almost like a light industrial use. It sounds like it's going to be well constructed, well maintained. Right now, while the house and it's so overgrown, but in the back they're selling a lot of and have equipment and broken down vehicles and other things I've seen there. So I think there'll be less potential damage to the wetlands and the environment from this, especially if through the process it's able to reduce some of the parking. It's been the best proposal for this site I think I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's I don't think it's detrimental to the area or the zoning, no damage or no potential harm to the groundwater overlay district. I'm very much in favor of this proposal as it's presented so far.
And well, I'll go next and say that 2 things. One, I do think it's a much better proposal than that I have seen in the past as a member of the zoning board. I do hope that the planning board takes into consideration the parking and loading area when they get to their site plan approval. Our jurisdiction is really over whether or not it's going to impact the groundwater more detrimentally than what's currently there. The reality is technology has changed since 1986 when we created those zoning bylaws for groundwater. And I think that they are doing well by the protection. So while it may not have been listed as an allowed use back in 1986, I can understand why it would be considered safe today. So I am also in favor.
Okay, Paul, what do you?
So I guess for me, the one thing that really stands out is sort of where we stand today in terms of what is on the property and where we are going to end up when the property is done. The fact that the current impervious square footage is only 7,700 square feet, and the post project is about 45,000 square feet, really is concerning to me. I think the development of a lot of the other buildings, even though the trucking may not be as much of an impact for this building, there has been an increased amount of development, which was spelled out by Marshall Gould, down Lyman, down Bartlett Street, which has had an impact, in my opinion, on sort of the traffic that flows down Bartlett Street. And I think that I struggle with this one because it does add some hindrance to the public good. So that's kind of where I stand right now. So I think the size of where we're going from, I think the quote of restriction against using the property The property, is currently being used as a residential property, whether we like it or not. If you look at variance law or case law, it is very restrictive on what we can and cannot approve. So I do struggle with this one.
Yeah, I mean, Marshall Gould laid out a very good story. I know just that residents are at wit's end with what's going on Bartlett Street, and this is just going to add to it. And the fact that we approve this tonight, and we're approving as what they're looking to bring in, but who's to say what's going to happen 10, 20 years down the road? The fact that it is groundwater one, and that is sacred. I am struggling with that. And Paul, you asked the question going from 7,700 to 45,000 square feet of impervious surface. I think even though it's minimal traffic now, who's to say in 20 years someone else comes along and does something different with it? I am struggling with this as well.
I mean, I do think we have to defer to the professionals when we question whether the impervious surface is affected. I mean, if the groundwater advisory committee and our town engineer has said that through technology, right, that you can replicate wetlands, you can divert runoff, that somehow going from 7,700 to 45,000 is not a technical issue. People have to understand, I mean, Northborough is not what it was in 1965. I mean, it changes. And yes, with change comes traffic, but if you abut an industrial zone, you get industrial neighbors. And this seems like a reasonable industrial neighbor to me.
And can I jump in as well? Just to follow up on that, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
If it remains as a residential use, and that's why I keep bringing up the fact that the vehicles and not all are being sold and stored in the backyard, we have no ability to control that and make that, as they were saying with the impervious cover, capturing that with the new system. So there's no protection to the wetlands with the continued present residential use. In addition, and going back, piggybacking on Fran, it is the corner of the industrial section of Northborough where we would want this kind of construction. Unfortunately, there are residents and residential on the other side of the street, but that we see that throughout the town as well. And as almost a buffer, especially with some of the other proposals with the site plan that could be implemented here, it will lessen that impact from what's down the rest of Bartlett and Lyman.
That's a good point.
If I also could piggyback on that, as far as truck traffic, I run through this area quite often, and I mean, there are trucks coming out of 55 Lyman Street pretty much every time I go down that road. So that the amount of truck traffic that this is adding is if, as I say, Marshall is saying that they'd have a truck arrive once a month. I'm doubting that even at once a week, you would never notice it compared to what's coming out of 55. And that's also if 41, the Crandall Hicks building, it seems mostly dead to me, but if that ever got activated again as a warehouse operation, again, this is not going to be the supplier of traffic onto Bartlett and Lyman. It's going to be those other 2 or 3 buildings down the road.
So can we just kind of go through that technology that is going to subside with the groundwater one? I think that's another thing that groundwater one to me does seem like it should be protected. And even though There are buildings on Lyman that were built before 1986 and before the groundwater protection overlay was instituted or passed. You know, would those buildings today be approved with this overlay? I don't know. I would tend to think probably not, but I think that it's up to us to protect, you know, the most important groundwater area that exists in our town. You know, I mean, truck traffic aside, whether it's going to, I mean, you know, Mark, I guess you basically are saying that there's so many trucks on Lyman and Bartlett that if there's a 2 more a week that, you know, it's not going to impact it that much. But, you know, I think looking specifically at the groundwater, you know, I guess to me then, if you're looking solely at the groundwater, then, you know, what, I guess, what was the technology that was being used to make the impervious service that is 6 times greater than what's currently there more efficient?
Oh, it's the whole idea is that they will control the groundwater. Right now, as Jeff has pointed out, they're going to have a car's oil is going to leak and it's going to hit the grass that it's stored on, or the crushed stone at best, and go right into the ground. What these guys are going to do is have the standard stuff we have on parking lots of captured into a containment system and then treated through that, or, you know, the oils are going to be separated out from the water and then it's going to go to an underground sump of some sort, so that we can be reasonably sure that the water that actually comes out of there is going to be cleaner than what's just dumped onto the ground from wherever.
Brad, do you want me to weigh in on the drainage plan that they said they were going to have? Although it wasn't actually reviewed, what they are required to do is provide stormwater management in conjunction with what's required at the state level. And as
Sure.
Mark pointed out, that all those things are in place. There's an oil water separator that will be required. There's an operation and maintenance plan, and there's continuous monitoring of the ongoing site if it were to be approved at the planning board level. Much of what you don't have right now with the single family house, and the fact that there are cars parked on areas that are not impervious and aren't able to capture the contaminants that run off of them.
Mhm.
There's one other point I
Yeah.
wanted to make out.
Sure.
I wanted to make for you. Marshall indicated that there are some other uses that could be more detrimental to the groundwater supply. And the one thing that the bylaw does allow is, and they have to by law, is allow agricultural uses, and they're exempt from groundwater special permit. And so there's a recommendation that they have to follow Department of Agricultural guidelines, but it doesn't mean that they can't have pesticides or other things. They just have to be applied in a manner that's appropriate with the manufacturer. And those could be far more detrimental to the groundwater than what's being proposed tonight. I just offer that as some food for thought.
All right. No, thanks, Fred. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, but I'm going back to the 3-point criteria for a variance. I mean, it's in groundwater 1. I mean, I'm not seeing too much of a hardship. And then the public good. I mean, we've gotten letters and things like that from abutters. I mean, Jeff, to your point, we've seen a lot worse coming in front of us based on this land, but at this point, it still doesn't meet the 3-point criteria to grant the variance, especially on groundwater 1. Groundwater 2, maybe. I know, and Marshall said we're on the cusp, we're there, but that well is pretty darn close to where they want to put this building.
And actually, Brett, I think well, unless I'm interpreting it incorrectly. They're requesting a variance because the hardship is because it's groundwater one. And that if it wasn't groundwater one, it would be an allowed use. But because it's groundwater one, they need a variance from the groundwater bylaw, not the zoning bylaw, right? So that is in itself the hardship. The fact that it abuts residential, there is absolutely nothing that could go across the street that is going to be what would be the preferred development when you abut a different zone. But I mean, unless I'm wrong about the hardship, but I thought the hardship was based on the fact that it's in groundwater and therein lies the hardship. But somebody has to tell me that's different.
That's
Yeah.
my understanding as well.
I just wanted to chime in one more time, Brad, if
Sure.
you don't mind.
Nope.
Friends, correct, they're asking for a variance from the groundwater portion of the zoning bylaw. All the groundwater stuff is in the zoning bylaw. So it's just one section that particular section that they pointed out is that because it's not allowed, because it's not permitted, it's considered prohibited. And that's what that section of the bylaw states. The town has allowed use variances historically, as Marshall pointed out, in several places around town. And because you allow use variances, it's appropriate for them to be before you. You have to make the determination on whether or not the variances meets the criteria or not. That's up to you to decide. The other thing that you should be aware is that the town does not get any of its water from the wells right now. Doesn't mean that we won't in the future. We do get our water from MWRA. The wells are still in place. They are not online, but they are not abandoned either, just for insurance sake. If the town ever needed to supplement its water supply and put those back in service, it's a bit faster if they're not abandoned than if they are. If they are, then they require what Bryant Furman outlined at the groundwater meeting is new source approval would be required, and that would take a very long time. And there be different standards that might be applicable. So it's more of a kind of a belts and suspenders thing. We don't need it, but we don't want to give it up either.
Right. Nope, that makes sense. Okay.
Can I ask Fred, how long has it been since we've used them?
That's a good question. Maybe 3 public works directors ago. 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Oh, some 6 to 10 years ago, somewhere in that range. I don't know the exact date that we went offline.
Okay.
3. So it's been a while. Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments regarding this? Lyman, 29, 1 Lyman, 29 Lyman, 0 Bartlett.
Do you want a proposal?
Yeah. Hearing no comments or questions. Yeah, let's
No.
do it.
Okay, I propose that we allow a variance for the construction of this proposal on 1 Lyman Street in groundwater protection, overlay protection district 1.
Second.
All those in favor?
Roll call, Fran, aye.
Jeff, I.
Mark,
Paul?
aye.
Paul?
Yep. I guess I will go aye.
All right. I approve as well. So it's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible to delay review of minutes to our next meeting?
Yes. Yeah, we're up against it. We're up against the time. Yeah, it's been a long
I'm
evening.
happy to stay, but this is to protect our IT people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the only thing that I do need you to do before you leave is to reappoint or to consider to reappoint Janet Sandstrom to the Earth Removal Board, to the Earthwork Board, excuse me. There's staggered terms on the Earthwork Board, and various boards have appointments to it.
Can I make a proposal and we get on with it?
Go ahead.
I propose that we nominate Janet Sandstrom to the Earth Removal or Control Board.
Earthwork.
Earthworks Board.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yeah, Mark says aye.
Aye.
Dick, aye.
All right.
Chair, I
Janet.
make a motion to adjourn.
Fran,
Okay.
second.
All right. All those in favor?
Fran,
Mark says
aye.
aye.
Leslie, aye. I'm
Aye.
voting on this
Dick,
one.
aye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good, everybody.
Good night.
See you on
All right.
Saturday morning, 9 o'clock.
Thanks, David. Thanks for staying.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you at the town meeting. Good night.
Good night.
This
Good
meeting
night,
is
everyone.
adjourned.
Thank you.